Okay, we call this meeting in order. This meeting is being held in council chambers, which are open for public attendance and participation. The meeting will also be live streamed for public viewing, but not participation at the link identified in the agenda. Email comments sent and received by the city clerk at least 24 hours before the meeting were distributed to the city council prior to the meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Kirchner.
Present.
Vice Mayor Harris. Here. Councilmember Baumgarten. Here. Councilmember Pasquale. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you for that. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Did you want to go to public comment first? Or did you want me to announce? Oh, we're at closed session. Never mind. Closed session. We have 2 items.
Write this down. You know, he made a boom. Write it down.
Engrave it in a stone tablet and put it on the wall, right?
Video. I'll be on the cover and settle at the airport, too.
Alrighty, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 2 items for closed session this evening. First is confer with real property negotiator pursuant to Government Code 54956.8. The property is APN 524110016, located at 825 Jones Street, Yuba City, California. APN and APN 519520, located at 1483 Gray Avenue, Yuba City, California. Negotiators Diana Langley, City Manager and Executive Director. The negotiating parties are to be determined under negotiation as whether to sell the properties, and if so, at what price and terms of payment. The second item is conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. Agency designated representatives are Diana Langley, City Manager, Natalie Springer, Human Resources Director, and I'm going to mess up, Ann Gillen. Gillen, thank you, I got it right. Ann Gillen, Community Services Director, Spencer Morrison, Finance Director, Ben Moody, Public Works and Development Services Director, Brian Baker, Police Chief, Jesse Alexander, Fire Chief, Michael Jarvis, LCW, Employee Organizations, so Yuba City Police Officers, Police Sergeants, Yuba City Firefighters, Local 3793, Yuba City Fire Management, First Level Managers, Mid-Managers, Police Board Mid-Managers, and Public Employees, Local Number 1, Unrepresented Employees or Confidential Employees, Executive Services Employees. Thank you.
Thank you, City Attorney. Do we have any comments from the public? Seeing none, we will adjourn to closed session. Okay. Go ahead and call this City Council meeting to order, and the Housing Successor Agency order. This meeting is being held in the City Council chambers, which are open for public attendance and participation. The meeting will also be live streamed for public viewing, but not participation at the link identified in the agenda. Email comments sent and received by the city clerk at least 24 hours before the meeting were distributed to the city council prior to the meeting. Can I have roll call, please?
Mayor Kirchner.
Present.
Vice Mayor Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Baumgarten.
Here.
Councilmember Pasquale. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Pasquale had an appointment, and Councilmember Shaw is dealing with a family emergency tonight, and our thoughts and prayers are with the Shaw family. We are going to begin this evening with a invocation by Pastor Dan Callahan from Legacy Church, Yuba City. Will remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance by Council Baumgarten.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for life. We thank you for our freedoms. Pray that you would give guidance and direction to our city officials, that you would guide their thoughts and give them wisdom as they move forward with our city. Thank you for blessing our city. We pray that you would turn the hearts of man and keep us safe. Thank you for our first responders and give their families strength and wisdom. May you daily protect them and give them both mental and physical strength. Lord, we pray that you'd pour out your spirit upon the churches of the city, that revival in the hearts of man would take place. Father, we need your presence in our homes, in our government, and in our lives. Thank you once again for this city. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Show me the pledge of allegiance, salute, and pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. City Attorney's report on closed session items.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was no reportable action taken in closed session.
Thank you, City Attorney. We're going to move down to ceremonial presentations. Number 1, Tortilla Flores Retirement Proclamation. I'd like to invite Jose and Maria Flores, owner of Tortilla Flores, to come forward and meet the City Council up front, please. Thank you. Boy, this is a big one. 40 years. 40 years. For those of you who've been in this community, one of my favorite restaurants has always been Tortilleria Flores on Percy Avenue, and it's always been a destination. And although I'm sad to see it go, you certainly you and your family put a lot of work. Where are they at? There they are. Put an enormous, and I've seen you guys over the years. You've probably seen me there once or twice, right? But thank you so much. 40 years is a long time. What it's added to our community. So thank you so much for that. Congratulations on your retirement and 41 years in business, whereas in 1982, Jose and Maria Flores established a tortilla manufacturing business and a bakery called Tortilleria Flores, located at 120 Percy Avenue. Later, they added the restaurant and a Mexican market. Then in 1990, the outside patio dining area along with additional seating. They always had about 8 to 10 employees, including themselves, which they were there a lot. Tortilleria Flores supported many community events, along with countless donations to schools, sports, churches, and always to those who may have needed needed a helping hand. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Wade Kirshner, Mayor of the City of Yuba City, and on behalf of the City Council, entire City Council, do hereby congratulate Jose and Maria Flores on their retirement, their well-earned retirement, from Tortilla Flores as of August 20th, 2023, and wish them the very best and thank them for being strong community members for the last 41 years. Let's give them a hand. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks to my family that we support 41 years. Also the community, they're being strong and helping my business to develop a good business. From the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you to everybody, to the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we have the picture, a Mr. Juan Delgado wanted to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. It's green now, so I guess you can hear me now. Yeah, technology. I just want to say that in my early career, when I first got hired by the unemployment office, as is well known here in our community, one of my first jobs was to find out where are the unemployed people at. Well, like everyone else, they all had to eat. So the best place that I knew is I needed to go to the local restaurant and find out what do you guys do out there. And the first place I went to was Percy Avenue, because I knew I had visited the labor camp in the past, and the closest restaurant to that was Tortilleria Flores. I walked in there and I saw this young man working there who is now retiring. His name is Jose Flores. So I established a conversation with him and I said, my name is Juan Delgado and I just recently was hired by the unemployment office, and I would like to talk to you about maybe some of the people coming here, they're looking for either a job or maybe some kind of help that we can provide. So that's how my conversation started, and created a friendship with both Mr. and Mrs. Flores. And from then on, every morning at 6 in the morning, I was there at the place talking to people, a lot of people coming in, getting their either breakfast or lunch for that. And I was really surprised at the amount of friendship that everyone that came into the store had with the owners. And I kind of thought it was a little bit unusual because usually when you have a business, your main thing is just to run the business. Well, these two individuals here, husband and wife, happen to be a little bit different. They welcome anyone and everyone, whether they have money to pay or not. No one walked out of there being hungry. Everyone got fed. And as you stated, I visited the place myself many times, and I never left hungry or unsatisfied. So for your effort, for your kindness, I want to thank you, and I want to say that it's a big loss for us, but I do understand that we'll have to do what we have to do. I just want to say thank you for your services, and thank you for serving our community. I wish you the best in your retirement.
Are we centered?
I want to say thank you to all of us for giving your time to help me and everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, number two, right now we're going to introduce Dr. Pan, Chancellor of Yuba Community College District. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mayor. Thank you so much to invite me and my colleague, Dr. Dalton from Yuba College to stand in front of you this evening to share a bit about one of major educational institutions in our community, Yuba Community College District. My name is Sean Pan. Board appointed me as the Chancellor of Yuba Community College District a couple of months ago. Very pleased to share a little bit about our district, what we do, what we contribute to the community. Thank you, Mayor, for inviting us to be here. Vice Mayor, Council members, City Manager Lanley, thank you. Thank you. Higher education is a very important part of American life. California community colleges have one of the largest higher education providers in the nation, in fact, in the world. Think about it. 116 community colleges, 76 districts, and there are 2 colleges, particularly one, Yuba College, is in this area. Our district are governed by 7 trustees. One of them just spoke to you. Juan Delgado actually is our board chair. The top 3 persons are elected for Yolo County and Lake County, and the bottom 4 are, you probably recognize quite a few of them. Juan Delgado just met. T. Garden is a well-known community leader. Dennis Burbank, Ms. Andrews are the 7 trustees. They're elected, so they govern. They are my bosses. The Chancellor's cabinet includes several members. On my left is the Tony Dodson
president of Yuba Community College. He'll have a chance to talk a bit, just in a few minutes, about Yuba College. And so I have vice president and also one of the interim president for Woodland Community College as a part of the district. As I said, community colleges are unique creation of American higher education. Since the Second World War, the American, particularly under the President Lyndon Johnson, realized when so many veterans coming back from Second World War realized United States, in order to compete, to stay competitive, we have to invest in higher education. So community college was started in those times. Yuba College actually is close to celebrating its 100 years anniversary. So Yuba College has a long history. Community college was emerging across the country. There are, in the 60s, 70s, almost every week, there's a new community college. The mission is a bit different. Unlike four-year institutions, we're here to serve local community needs. For students who are not sure about their choice, their major, they can come to community colleges to learn, discover themselves. So our mission at the Yuba Community College District is really try to provide high-quality, affordable higher education. There are, throughout the country, throughout our communities, affordable, high-quality education. We want to become a premier community college. We want to strengthen our ties with the community, providing equitable. This is a key word. Our board chose this word. Equitable means regardless your family background, regardless your economic ability to pay, you can come to Yuba Community College, one of our college, our centers, to get quality education. So Yuba Community College has two colleges. Both of them are Hispanic Serving Institution, HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. That denomination, that note is very important. It allows us to access federal funding to support because the percentage of Latinos, Hispanic population among our not only faculty staff, but our students. So you can see one district, two HSI, two Hispanic serving colleges, 3 centers in 8 counties, a little bit over 4,000 square miles we serve. That includes Colusa County, Lake County centers, and not far from here, just a couple of miles south here is the Sutter County Center. That's part of Yuba College. We offer a lot of great deal programs. I want to share with you quickly. These are the most popular programs. We serve close to 1,200 students. We serve much more. The last few years, COVID-19, the fires that also affected our enrollment. But you can see we provide very comprehensive programs. There are associate degrees. We prepare students to transfer to 4-year university. But many of them get terminal associate degrees, allowing them to get a decent job, pay at a very good rate. So allied health program, biologies, radiology, I'm not going to read all of that. But we really have a lot of degree program as well as certificate program. People who are working, who want to upgrade their skill sets and broaden their profile can come to one of our colleges to do so. We actually is a major economic driver to support economic mobility. This is a recent data, even though it's 2021, but it's still relevant today. We engaged a national company to do how we contribute to local economy. As you can see, in 21-22, we produced over 1,500 associate degrees, 383 degrees to transfer to UC Davis, CSU Chico, and of course, CSU at Sacramento, 1,700 plus certificates. It's estimated our graduates contribute to over close to 17 million. Did I read that right? Yeah. $17 million to local economy. And also 601 YCC students transfer to four-year university to continue their education. In this year, about $17 million financial aid was given out to your sons, your daughters, your brothers and sisters. 2 years ago, it's a little bit of $18 million. These federal financial aid, some are loans, some are grants, some are Pell Grants. Students don't have to pay, allow them, regardless their family background, to access higher education. There are many financial aid, including promise from the state, so this is not occasion to get to the details. But one of the messages I want to make across for those of you who are listening, financial should never be a barrier to our citizens in Yuba County or Sutter County or any. They can come to us, we'll find a way to help them. One of the last bullets I forget to say, but Dr. Dodson will mention, we serve hundreds of dual enrolled students. They are part of high school students, but they're also college students. Many of them actually will get associate degree before they get high school degree. And Dr. Dodson will share with you, we also started middle college. So without further ado, thank you, Mayor, thank you all of you. My colleague, great leader in our community, Dr. Tonya Dodson, President of Yuba College.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. As you know, I'm never going to turn down an opportunity to talk a little bit about Yuba College, but I also know a good brief is a brief, and this will be just that, I promise. Next slide. As you all heard a little bit about, Yuba College is not only the historical center of the Yuba Community College District, but it's a true comprehensive community college. We continue to maintain a high career and technical education portfolio, everything from police and fire to nursing and welding and automotive. We also have a very active theater and performing arts center for both our music programs and performing artists, but also the communities as well. We have 10 athletic teams, and while we no longer operate out of Marysville High School, we do continue to operate both in Marysville at our campus that we joined in the early 1960s and in the Sutter County Center, which is not too far from where we are right now. Next slide. Yuba College served over 8,000 of the district's students in the 2021-2022 year and produced over 3,600 FTES, which is about 64% of the enrollment in the Yuba Community College District. A majority of our students are students of color. A majority of them attend part-time, which means that they take just a couple of classes at a time. In the 2021-2022 year, we had 74% of students attending online. That year was still impacted by our mitigation efforts in the COVID-19 pandemic, so we had a number of requirements that meant it was a higher online portfolio. Today, we have a scheduling goal of at least 50% of our courses being face-to-face, and we've been fairly successful in continuing that scheduling trend. You do see that there's a growing high school student population for us thanks to our strong partnerships with Yuba City Unified School District, Sutter Union High School, Marysville Joint Unified, Wheatland, East Nick, et cetera. Next slide. Our mission and vision are really centered on the historical intention of community colleges as an open access institution. That means if you want to come to a community college like Yuba College, you can come. You can come for a certificate or a degree. You can come to upskill or reskill, learn a new skill, or if you just want to take a class to continue your education or learn something new, you can do that at Yuba College. Next slide. Some of the things that we've been working on in the last few years and will continue into the coming year center around improving our students' ability to get in and stay in and have opportunities to finish. Some specific examples are around strengthening our pipeline. You heard a little bit about our work to strengthen the pipeline with our K-12 partners, but we also know we need to do that for our students who want to continue their education. One program that we've been working really hard with our partner at Sutter County Office of Education to finalize is a teacher prep program with Chico State. These students will take their first 2 years of their associate's degree from Yuba College and then transition to classes at Yuba College that are offered by Chico State in an effort to increase the number of qualified K-12 teachers for our community and to keep our students here local. We are also working very hard on our facilities. In the last few years, we've had to make some decisions about ensuring that we're sustainably caring for that historical center of the community college district, which meant we've done a lot of work to paint and repair and make good decisions. Before we go to the last slide, I will also mention that the unfortunate reality of educational administrators today is we have to be pretty exceptional at emergency response, and we are continuing our efforts to be prepared for whatever we need to be prepared for our students and our employees in the future. But on the last slide, you'll see, if you haven't been out to Yuba College's Marysville campus, I want to encourage you to come out. It's a much different place in just the last 3 years. On the left is what our theater looked like when I arrived in 2020, and on the right is what it looks like today. The entire campus has been painted. We've added pole signs, new electronic reader boards, tried to create an environment that not only represents the vibrant community that we serve, but the students and employees who work there and learn there every day. Thank you for an opportunity to give you a brief update on Yuba College. It's a pleasure to see you all.
Thank you, Dr. Dotson, and thank you, Dr. Fan. Just a quick personal note. That university touches every corner of this community. I started off as a child going out there for basketball camps that they at least they used to hold, and I'm an alumnus, class of '89. But you know, your theater program is well known. The athletics is well known, and obviously the education is as well. Thank you for including me last week. That was very educational, and I'm sure everybody else in that room thought so as well. Gentlemen, you have anything to add?
Well, normally I just let it flow, but yeah, I too graduated. I'm a little bit earlier than the mayor here, but as evidenced by here. But not only with the 2-year degree program, but then I had the opportunity later to go back for the EMT1 program as well. So vocational and career tech ed and all that stuff is very dear to my heart. And it serves, I mean, I don't know, I feel like it's maybe a little diamond, not a diamond in the rough, but it's something out there that we need to really do our part to focus, because it is a treasure trove of opportunity. And despite anyone's interest, you got it all covered, and it's really, really wonderful. And Tawny, thank you for all you've done out there. It's visible, and more than just a mural too, but you can feel the positive vibe out there. So thank you very much. Make me want to sign up for something. We'll see what happens.
Thanks for the presentation. I too graduated much earlier than the mayor and the vice mayor, Yuba College has always been an important part. I actually was an instructor out there for a little while, and it's an important component of our community. And I know that all of us here sitting at this level here really want to support that effort. And to the vice mayor's point, you can feel a good vibe out there right now. It's changed, and thank you for that. I know you have a team, but still, the leader leads, and I appreciate your efforts. Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate your support. We're here to serve our communities. Thank you.
It's good stuff. Number 3, zoning audits presentation by Jamin, Kimmell, and Cascadia Partners.
Hello, Mayor Kirchner and members of the council. My name's Ashley. I'm with Development Services, and I'm just going to introduce our presenter today. So a little brief amount of background. In 2021, the city received a regional early action planning grant of $100,000. And the purpose of this grant program is really to further housing to accommodate the housing shortages that we're facing in California. So the city contracted with Cascadia Partners to do a zoning audit to identify some of the development standards that might be barriers. And tonight we have Jamin Kimmell here. He's a partner with Cascadia Partners to present the report to council of what they found in this zoning audit. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jamin.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Kirchner and councilors. Glad to be with you here tonight, and looking forward to giving you, well, hopefully it can be a pretty quick summary of our work so far for Yuba City. I think Ashley covered some of the just background on who we are and why we're here. But generally, I'm a land use planner, but I also work on a lot of projects that focus on housing policy and housing planning and the intersection with development code and its impact on housing production and housing affordability. So it's kind of the type of work I do and why I'm here tonight. Let's just go ahead and get into our work on the zoning audit. So the presentation tonight, I'm going to try to get through in about 15 minutes. I'll move pretty quickly. I have a lot of slides. We try to use some visuals to break down some of this information because it gets kind of complex. But we'll first cover in the first couple of sections just kind of the why the city elected to audit the zoning code, and then kind of how we did it. What kind of methods did we apply? And then we'll get into what we found, so what were the key findings, and then following that from that, what are some of our recommendations? Before we get into it, I think I also want to remind you that this is just an informational presentation, so we're talking about concepts for development code changes, but no action is requested at this stage, and we think this is just first phase of a series of code updates that could be implemented over time, further study needed, more community outreach needed, I think, before these come before you for adoption. So a bit of context for why we're here. So Ashley mentioned the regional early action planning grants that came from SACOG, and so SACOG provided the funding for this project through some money that came from the state, and the city elected to focus using their funding on auditing the zoning code and identifying some impediments to both building enough housing overall and then more affordable forms of housing. And so I think what some of that impetus for looking at the code specifically was coming from the developer community and identifying some unnecessary barriers they find in zoning. Another background for why the city is looking at the zoning code today. So the city made some commitments in the housing element, which was adopted a couple of years ago, to address some barriers in the zoning code to addressing housing issues. And those three issues, if I could summarize them in really brief, would be overall housing supply, so having enough housing being produced and developed to keep up with population growth, which really hasn't happened historically in many, many places across the state and the country. So it's kind of a persistent issue in many places. Affordability, making sure that there is enough housing overall and enough housing of the right types that could be affordable to a broad range of the population. And then also demographic changes. That's changing the need for housing, the market for housing. So aging population, the millennial generation starting to form households. So looking at all those factors, the housing element then process then resulted in some identified regulatory policies, which are basically actions to address some regulations in the code. And so those actions included, based on their review of the zoning code, some policies to try to facilitate building a variety of housing types, so more diversity in the kinds of housing that are built, making it more easier to build multifamily housing on smaller lots was one issue specifically that was identified. And then making it easier to build also housing in commercial zones. And so those are some of the things that the city committed to in the housing element that was then adopted or approved by the state. And so this project is then following up on some of those recommendations and digging further in to ask question, why is the code making these things difficult to do, and what specific kinds of changes would be most effective? So how do we approach this work? I first off just want to clarify that Title 8 of the Municipal Code includes a number of different chapters which cover a lot of topics. We really hone in on chapters primarily 2 and 5, subdivision and zoning. Those are the ones that have the most direct impact on kind of the economics of housing development. And related to that, chapter 7, which deals with planned developments. So the zone districts we looked at included all the residential zones in the city as well as the commercial zones. And so just as a kind of refresher of what those zones are, so the R1 zone allows exclusively single-family houses, which there's some allowance for attached houses in some circumstances. It's mapped to many existing single-family neighborhoods in some areas that will grow in the city. I think this city limits map is a bit out of date, so if that boundary looks a little off, just know the report has the right version of it in it. The R2 zone allows for single-family houses, but also duplexes. And so those pictures on the right show a few examples of those duplexes actually built. And also fairly widely mapped, and it's mapped to some large sites which are likely to develop sometime in the future. And then the R3 zone, which allows for multifamily housing, also single-family and duplex, and usually about anywhere between 2 to 4 stories tall. So the commercial zones we also looked at. So the C1 zone is a neighborhood commercial zone mapped mostly to some small parcels kind of distributed throughout the city, intended for kind of low-intensity commercial uses. And then we grouped together here the other commercial zones, which are community commercial, office commercial, general commercial, and we group them together because they generally treat housing in the same way. So they regulate housing the same way. So the barriers to building housing in these zones are similar. So how do we actually evaluate the development code and its impact on housing? So one of the ways we do that is by building 3D models. So we try to approximate how a developer or architect would think about and try to respond to the parameters of the code. We think this is important because you can kind of see not only how does one specific standard impact what you can build, but how does the combination of different standards impact that? So it's a holistic look at it. So you'll see these kind of models throughout this presentation and then in the report as well. Another thing we do is we use the physical information that we get from those 3D modeling to put into some financial pro forma analysis. And this is kind of a real estate tool where we kind of test two different things. And one is, would that development be economically feasible at the market prices today? And if not, what does that price need to be for development to be feasible? So that's those two points you see on this chart of what the minimum feasible rent or price would need to be for that project to pencil or be economically feasible, and the market rent today. So this helps us know both the likelihood that that project would be developed by how economically viable it is, and secondly, the affordability of the housing should that project be developed. So those two metrics kind of help us really understand what the code's likely to deliver in terms of your housing goals. We also did some interviews and best practice research to kind of supplement some of that kind of more quantitative analysis. So we looked at, did some interviews with local developers. We researched the code standards for some peer jurisdictions, so jurisdictions similar to Yuba City around the region, and then also compiled some documentation of best practices we think are relevant to some of the barriers identified in the code. So all that information you'll see in the appendices of the report. Okay, so let's get into some of the findings, what we found. So this chart here is a lot of information there, but the key message is this just gives you a snapshot of what housing types are allowed in different zones today in Yuba City. You may be familiar with this, but it's sometimes a good refresher. So the R1 zone primarily allows single family and duplex or attached houses in some situations. R2 allows single family and duplex. R3 allows all the way through multifamily. And then all of those commercial zones only allow residential uses or housing if they're in conjunction with a commercial use. So effectively then it's called a mixed use development. And most of those zones require that the residential units be on the upper floors of the building. So it'd be a commercial on the ground floor and residential above. This is another dense slide, but just a lot of, we can come back to this if you're interested in what specific standards apply in each zone. So this is just kind of a background reference in there, and I'll skip over that. So the first kind of overall finding we have is that the use regulations, so the types of housing that are allowed in each zone, in our estimation, prohibit some types of housing that could be otherwise compatible with that zone district. And so the concept of missing middle housing, which this diagram depicts here, is useful here. And that term kind of means just there's a scale or spectrum of housing types that range from detached houses all the way up to larger mid-rise apartment buildings. And the code today pretty well covers the two ends of that spectrum. So the R1 and R2 zone cover the lower intensity types, and the R3 and commercial zones cover the higher intensity types. But there is this kind of missing middle where there's some types of housing that could be appropriate and could provide for some more affordable housing options, but they are not permitted by the zoning code. And in order for those to be developed, we'd have to go through a plan development or another process, which in itself can be a barrier to housing development. So what are those missing middle types? Some examples of those would be a single-family house on a smaller lot, which is that image there on the left. A triplex or quadplex, so you might have 3 to 4 units that are attached on one lot there. Could be as apartments or condominiums. Or townhouses, which are attached units, but they're on their own lot and could be sold individually. All of these types can be regulated, so they're kind of a similar scale to single-family houses and could in some ways fit in with those neighborhoods if they're regulated appropriately. But today, many of these types, or almost all these types, aren't permitted in either the R1 or the R2 zones. Another type that's kind of specific is cottage cluster, and this is seeing more and more interest around the country. And it's kind of a unique type because it's a group of small detached homes that share a common open space and parking. This type wouldn't be allowed today because it doesn't really fit in any of the categories in the zoning code of the kinds of housing that are allowed. Would have to go through a special process to be approved. I think there's some good reason to look more closely at this type and see if there are ways the city can support it. Talk a little bit about more of that in the recommendations. So another barrier to some of those missing middle housing types in some zones, but primarily in the R2 zone, is minimum lot size standards. And so here's an example from the R2 zone. So the minimum lot size is 3,500 square feet with a minimum lot width of 60 feet. And the challenge with that is that if you're building at that minimum lot size and you're building a subdivision, let's say, then it's actually nearly impossible to build to the maximum density that would be allowed by the general plan for the R2 zone, which is about 14 units an acre. So this chart with the blue bars here shows as you get more efficient for a subdivision, which means you have less space that's dedicated not to lots, but to roads and to stormwater facilities and so on, you can achieve a higher density, but at 3,500 square foot lots, you can't ever quite get to that 14 units an acre, which is allowed by the general plan. So there's kind of an inconsistency what the general plan would allow, but also what the code allows for in terms of the minimum lot sizes. So then kind of shifting over to the R3 and commercial zones. So one of the main barriers to multifamily housing that we see in the zone, and particularly on smaller lots, are the off-street parking requirements. And so this test here kind of gives you a sense of how those parking requirements impact both feasibility and affordability of housing. And so this is the model of the existing code. So it's built to about 2 spaces per unit. If you're providing a parking lot with 2 spaces for every dwelling unit, you really max out at about 8 units on this site. This is a half-acre site, in about a 2-story building, and so that's about 17 units per acre. That mostly means that you're probably likely to get some larger and more expensive units than you would otherwise if those parking requirements were slightly lower. And so this example shows if you were to lower the parking requirements to something more like 1 space per unit, you're able to get on that same site 20 units instead of 8, a significantly higher density. And then what that translates into, because of the efficiencies of building at that higher density, is a lower minimum feasible rent on those units that you built. And so it's 11% decrease in the minimum feasible rent. So that's where you get that connection between the code and potential affordability of housing that can be developed under it. So another standard that has a similar impact on density and affordability is minimum open space requirements. So minimum open space is important in apartment developments. There should be some area for playgrounds and places for kids to play and for people to be outside. But that space does come at some cost, and so we tried to test and see what is that cost, and is there a reason to think look more critically about how much open space is required. So the city currently requires 200 square feet per unit of open space, and so what that means is that in apartment development like this, a significant amount of the site is dedicated to or meeting that minimum open space requirement. And if you were to reduce that requirement, it would open up the opportunity to build at a slightly higher density. And so you can see this project, the initial project, go back here. Initial project was 192 units. Reduce open space, you open up the possibility for up to 260 units. So it's getting more units out of the project and a slight reduction in the minimum feasible rent. So turning to commercial zones. So as I mentioned, housing is limited to the upper floors in the commercial zones. So this is a model of a project that would likely be built in one of the commercial zones today. The entire ground floor would be required to be commercial spaces. And there's a few impacts that has on the feasibility of housing development. One is it limits the overall number of units on the site because you can't build any residential on the ground floor. Requires a lot of commercial space, which may or may not be feasible to fill with tenants, depending on the where it is. And it generates a lot of parking that you must then accommodate on the site. So reducing that open space has a positive impact on the number of units you can build, the amount of density, the overall density of the site, and how feasible that project is based on the ROI, return on investment estimate we have here. So this is a slide that kind of summarizes how we view the barriers in the code. So it's important to recognize we've pointed out a lot of barriers, but there's a lot of standards and regulations in the code that aren't barriers and that are important and have a good public purpose. Many of these standards also have an important public purpose, but it's just a question of balancing. Do some of these standards unnecessarily become a barrier to housing production and housing affordability? Okay, I'll quickly go through the recommendations now. So in the R1 zone, the concept there would be to allow for some smaller lot single-family houses in cluster subdivisions. So the idea here is the overall site has a similar level of density as what would be allowed today, but allow those lots to be smaller and require some minimum amount of open space. There's benefits to that in terms of just some flexibility for developers to fit different kinds of sites. Another key idea here is that this would be allowed administratively, so it wouldn't require a planned development or conditional use or some other approval like that. Second recommendations for R1 is to evaluate opportunities to reduce minimum street widths. So overly wide streets have some impact on the cost of development and on the densities that are achievable. And so this one needs some further studies. We're not transportation planners, so we didn't look really deeply into how narrow the streets could be. And that requires some additional study with Public Works, your fire marshal, other things like that. But we know there's benefits to it, and there might be opportunity there to allow some slightly narrower streets. In the R2 zone, we recommend some changes to reduce barriers to single-family houses on smaller lots. And so these are the small lot detached housing I was talking about. And so that's, in order to do that, you need to have some reductions both to the minimum lot size and also to the minimum lot width in that zone. And then another recommendation for the R2 zone is to define cottage cluster housing, a specific type, and allow that housing in the R2 zone. And so this is similar to the cluster subdivision idea, but it's a slightly higher density. And really the key idea here is to allow that higher density, but to institute some design standards for what this project would look like, and to require those units to be smaller. And so if all these units were 3,000 square feet, you wouldn't get much affordability benefit out of that. So that's the trade-off here, is to allow some smaller units, but at a higher density. So similar idea for duplexes in terms of the minimum lot size being a barrier to some of those. We think that reducing it from 6,000 to 4,000 square feet would be more consistent with the general plan and the allowed density, and would encourage some smaller units. And then lastly, for the R2 zone, the recommendation is to expand the kind of menu of housing types that could be built in that zone to not only be single-family houses and duplexes, but potentially a triplex or a quadplex, or a 3 to 4 unit townhome project. And then the R3 zone, we recommend reducing that minimum open space requirement from the current 200 square feet per unit to something in the range of 50 to 100 square feet per unit. We think something in that range is more achievable, has less of an impact on housing, your housing goals, but also to focus more on the quality of the open space in development. So this might entail looking at design standards for what gets put in that open space to make sure it's usable, functional, and kind of higher value. R3 zone, we also recommend reducing that minimum parking requirement for multifamily, and we recommend a kind of a general reduction of about 25% from the existing standards, and that's the slide here shows how that plays out in terms of the size, depending on the size of the unit. This could be implemented as a citywide reduction, or it could be specific to certain locations or used as an incentive for certain kinds of development. In those commercial zones, we recommend providing more flexibility for housing, and so there's some options laid out in the report for how that flexibility could be provided. And the report discusses some of the kind of benefits and drawbacks of those different options. But hopefully that's enough guidance for your planners to move forward and think about some other ways to allow housing in those commercial zones. Then lastly, we know that the city would prefer to see mixed-use development in those commercial zones. You don't need to, and if you provide more flexibility for housing, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give up on the goal for having more mixed-use development. And so we would recommend options for providing incentives for vertical mixed-use development. So those things could look like a density bonus or a parking reduction for specifically mixed-use buildings. Okay, so takeaways. Code does offer feasibility, or offers opportunities for a variety of housing types, but there's really some limitations on economic feasibility. Relying on some of those projects to be approved through those discretionary procedures will limit housing production. So a lot of our recommendations come out of the idea that you should have clear and objective standards for where housing is allowed and how it's allowed. We talked a lot about enabling higher density, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't regulate the form and design of housing. And so we can separate those issues, allowing higher density, but having design standards and guidelines that would apply. And again, many options for how to address some of the barriers that are identified in this report. We recommend a few in the report, but we know lots of different ways to structure the code going forward. Okay. So welcome your comments, questions.
Thank you for that very thorough presentation. Gentlemen, you got any questions?
Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I think that the concern that I would have, and I don't know if it's a concern, is when we start reducing parking requirements, we begin to add to the narrative that exists in some places of our community about transportation issues and overcrowding. So I think that's something that we'd have to try to find the happy spot or the sweet spot on. I like the concept of the mixed-use stuff with the commercial on the bottom and the residential on the top. There are, you call them cottage clusters. There are some of those existing in our city. And I've often wondered why that doesn't happen. I think you explained it. We don't allow it to happen. But that seems like a reasonable solution to some of the the housing issues that we have in regards to affordability. But I'm assuming that staff will be bringing us back their recommendations as
Thank you. So yes, the next steps on this is staff is going to be taking this report, looking at the recommendations and continuing on our analysis of the best ways to amend our zoning code to maybe lessen some of these barriers. And then ultimately that will come back towards the council. So this is just a kind of informative. We still have work to do and we will definitely be looking at alternatives, finding which recommendations work best in Yuba City, coordinating with other departments, and then going on from there.
Thanks. No further questions.
All right, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to inquire about. We talk about the cottage courtyard cluster. A lot of folks have came, it's kind of popular now, and we've had some folks even come here and approach me about the tiny home options. And would that be falling in? It would be in that scenario right there? Probably even smaller than those we have there. Is that correct?
Yeah, it could be. Tiny homes are one housing type that could be kind of integrated into a cottage cluster. The idea there is you kind of have some standards for when you have a grouping of them on the same site. How should it be arranged? What amenities should be on the site? So that's what the cottage cluster standards would set a standard for.
All right. I would encourage, if it's possible and appropriate, to work specifically the tiny home when we start developing policies and whatnot. Some folks, whatever mentally, because it comes in on wheels, they have a mental blockage and make it happen. We can put a permanent foundation or do whatever, but a lot of people who are just starting out, well, my son lives in Utah and he's looking for houses when he gets out of the military in California. It's a no-go already. So some people, it could be the difference between home ownership and just to get their foot in the door. And I think it would be a good idea for a lot of people. So if we can maybe address that when possible, that'd be nice. Thank you very much for the presentation, though, by the way. It was a lot of work, clearly.
Thank you. Okay, public communication. Parents of interested citizens, you are welcome and encouraged to participate in this meeting. Public comment is taken on action items appearing on the consent calendar or business items on the agenda when they are called. Public comment on any other item within the scope of the city's jurisdiction, including items not listed on the agenda, will be considered at this time. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Members of the public submitting written requests at least 24 hours prior to the meeting will be allotted 5 minutes to comment per speaker. Repetitive comments will be limited, and large groups are encouraged to select representatives to express the opinion of the group. We have a written request by Kim Marquardt.
Yes, my name, is this on? Okay, thank you. All right, my name is Kimberly Marquardt. I am a business owner of Heaven Can Wait Life Coaching here in Yuba City. I am also a 50-plus year community member. And I spoke 2 weeks ago here about our homeless, a little bit about the homeless, a little bit about the sewage problem and the contamination of waterways, and a couple of other things. And the very next day after I spoke here, I was approached by the Yuba City Police Department and the county members and sheriff, where they came out to Mosquito Beach boat launch and assaulted me, left a bruise on my arm, put me in handcuffs, took my porta potty, wrote me a camping ticket. Well, this isn't the first time that this has happened to me. Let me go back a little bit and give you a little bit of history about myself. I am homeless right now again. I was homeless back in 2021 when I had breast cancer, and I needed to be housed and to take care of my breast cancer. And so the Cancer Center wrote me a letter for consideration to put me into the New Haven Courts Permanent Supportive Housing program that they had going on. And I moved in there on June 16th, where the mayor and everybody came out front and they cut the ribbon and stated the fact how it was giving people hope that we didn't have before because we were homeless. And I moved into New Haven Courts on June 16th. A lot of things took place at New Haven Courts. And I've got to stop for just a second. I thought I could do this, and I know I can do this. I know I can do it. Anywho, when New Haven Courts is the permanent supportive housing that they had for the chronically homeless of the community and the severely mentally ill. Okay, so there was 19 severely mentally ill that some of them came from institutions, and they placed them in there, put us all in there together. There was 39 residents. And a lot of things took place because of the severely mentally ill people being there. We had a gentleman that was paranoid schizophrenia, and the medicine that he was on for his illness was the first symptom or side effect from it was arousal. So now we have a gentleman that's on medicine that makes him aroused, and he is going around assaulting the severely mentally ill women of the complex. And I have here 450 reports, police reports, that was made in New Haven Courts in the first year, 450 calls for services. And we have here rape, threats, elder abuse, and back when all this stuff started taking place, being a life coach that I am, and I worked with the severely mentally ill, you know, and help them learn how to cook, learn how to do things in life. And I was the one that, when I made the phone calls for the services as the rapes were taking place, okay, we're going to cut this a little short. I have been evicted from New Haven Courts on an illegal eviction. It's been out here for a year now. Illegal evictions for helping the victims get restraining orders. And okay, let me stop for a second here. Meanwhile, I've notified the mayor, I've notified the housing authority, every member that's sitting in front of me today, Diana Langley, Mr. Boomgarden. I haven't spoken with you. I've spoken with Kirchner and David Shaw. And they all, instead of trying to take care of the situation, decided that they didn't want the public to know what had taken place there. And they including the DA, they evicted me, and there's so much more. There's so much more. But in the nutshell, I have been assaulted, and I have been so many things, and blatantly disregarded is, I guess, the thing that I've got to say, blatantly disregarded. And now there is going to be a lawsuit. And it's going to be known to the public what has taken place at New Haven Courts Permanent Supportive Housing on your guys' watch. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a second card from, is it Phil? Yes. Phil Trainer? Yes. Can you step to the mic, sir?
My name is Phil Trainer. It's a long time since I've been here before. But before I say anything, I want to make the following statement. Just a second, I gotta get my glasses. First of all, I want to apologize to Sean Harris. I made some remarks after he and I was to have a meeting last week. The problem arose from me not knowing that there was 2 Starbucks restaurants on Butte House Road. Councilman Harris, I apologize for any remarks I made. I've come tonight to bring up the issue of the high utility bills we're having in the area and that we will continue to have in the area. I don't come before you to gripe and moan. I generally come here with something that might help the community. I came across a group in California called the California Community Power Association. This is an association that's made up of 6 counties in Northern California. They somewhat compete with PG&E. First of all, I should say, what I'm going to say, I can't tell you what Sean and I would have gone over in 3 minutes. But I would like to think that Yuba City should take a look at this Community Power Association because we have all the abilities to do the same thing that Marin County and the other counties have done. This association is made of 2.7 million people in Northern California. It extends throughout the state, and we in this city, in this county, have never even looked at this type of thing. We can bring our PG&E bill down quite radically if the council is willing to make an effort. I would be more than happy to assist if at all possible. Marin County claimed they have saved over $5 million for their citizens by reductions in their PG&E bills. It's not that you reduce the PG&E bills that much, but it's the way the PG&E bill you. I don't know if most people, that's why I thought my 3 minutes wouldn't work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, can I make one statement before I leave?
Sure.
Your PG&E bills right now, if you're on a solar system, a lot of people aren't. If you if you owe PG&E money for your monthly bill, you're being charged about 50 cents a kilowatt. 3 years ago, that price was 14 cents a kilowatt. So take a look at what I say, and I'll say if I can be of any help at all, call me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Sean, I apologize for the remarks I made.
I don't know what the remarks were, Phil.
Meeting.
I wasn't privy to the remarks, but we shared an email exchange, and I think what it was not 2 Starbucks on Butte House, but you were sitting out front waiting for me, and I was sitting out inside waiting for you. And so it was one of these left-hand, right-thing things.
No, you were on one Butte House Road Starbucks, and I was at the other one.
I'm not sure where the other one is, but...
It's out of to Target.
At what?
At Target.
Oh, in Target. Yeah, okay. I didn't know you were at Target. Okay, yeah. Anyway.
I apologize.
Well, apology accepted, I guess, but we can certainly talk later, and thank you for coming, Phil.
Oh, and my 50-cent thing is made up. You can take a look at your last bill. You'll probably see what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional comments from the public? Any additional comments from the public? Can you go ahead and step to the mic, sir? State your name and address, please.
Yeah, I live off of Bridge Street in Yuba City, and they're developing my street across the street. And
Sir,
I got a letter
can
from
you state your name, please?
Can you state your name, sir?
Tom Dunkel. All right, I got a letter from you guys saying that I could come here because they're going to build Section 8 across the street from my house. Okay? And I don't have much crime in my neighborhood, but, I mean, I was under the understanding that they're building 10 houses and 6 duplexes in that field. So now they're bringing this Section 8 over there. And I've already talked to all my neighbors, and they should have came with me, but they didn't. But, you know, I don't know. We really don't want Section 8 across the street from my house. I've lived here for 30 years.
Pardon me, Mr. Duncan. I'm so sorry. I think this is an agenda item a little bit further down.
Oh.
Under the, I believe it's the Ratliff duplex. It's 3 duplexes, about 6 units.
There's supposed to be 10 houses and 6 duplexes.
Okay. Which one is?
Walton Bridge,
Ashley, I'm sorry, which item on the agenda is this?
right behind the bank.
Oh, it's not on the agenda? I apologize, Mr. Duncan. Please complete your.
Well, I got a letter from you guys saying I could come here, so I just want to say that they're developing the street. You know, everybody that goes to school at River Valley, you know, there's no sidewalks. They put a sidewalk on the other side of the street, but there's no sidewalks on our side of the street, no drains. I'm disabled. The water sits in front of my house like a lake. You can't even go step in my car in the wintertime because there's so much water. So, you know, you guys got to improve the street if you're going to build houses across the street. That's all it's to it. That's all I got to say. I'm done. See you guys.
Thank you.
I would just add to that that has to do with the
Sir?
general plan that's going to be considered later.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moody. Any additional comments from the public?
Hi, my name is Benjamin Garcia, 710 Aspen Drive. Don't really have anything specific to say, just wanted to show up, let my voice be heard, claim my seat. I also wanted to thank the gentleman who invited the Spirit of God into the house, because I really do feel like that's what we need. We need direction, and I got delivered from drugs and alcohol about 13 years ago, and I had a life change, and I'm here today because I stated this last week. I want to be part of the solution. I want to help. But at the same time, you know, let it be known that I am here. I'm not afraid to rock the boat if that's what it takes, and be a voice of dissent where one's needed. And I guess since I have the time, I would like to say that something that is kind of alarming to me is the inability to view the law objectively. I feel like sometimes we look at the law, and this is just generally speaking, and I'm saying that because of just some of the things that I've had to go through recently has got me to look at the law completely different, and I feel like we need to reintroduce an objective state of mind to it, because sometimes when we look at it, it's really not what we think, and laws are being applied to people in ways that they shouldn't be. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the public? Any additional comments? Okay, moving along to consent calendar. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and can be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items prior to the time the council votes on the motion unless members of the city council request specific items to be discussed or removed from the consent calendar for individual action. Do we have any comments from the public on consent calendar items 5 through 9? 5 through 9? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council.
The mayor moved to approve consent calendar items 5 through 9.
I've got a motion from the vice mayor.
Second that, please.
And a second from Councilmember Baumgarten. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Moving to business item number 10, Shanghai Garden Park Playground Equipment, presented by Ann Gillen, our Community Service Director. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we're going to be talking, well, actually I want to introduce to you first. I'm Ann Gillen, Community Service Director, and I have Rob Condry, who is our Parks and Grounds Superintendent, and Ernie Hernandez for our Parks Supervisor. So they're going to be here to help me answer any questions anybody may have. Tonight we're going to talk about the Shanghai Garden Park playground equipment. The purpose is to maintain and enhance the city's quality of life through safe parks and promote healthy opportunities for residents of all ages. Okay, a little bit of background. At the August 15th City Council, we had 2 Shanghai Park residents come in and talk about how a lot of multiple pieces out at Shanghai Bin Park are damaged or worn or just completely unsafe. The lifespan of equipment is usually 15 to 20 years, and Shanghai Park right now is at 24 years old. Staff agrees that there are a lot of issues with the playground that need to be taken care of, and so I'm here tonight to give you 3 options that hopefully can take care of those issues. This picture right here is just an overview of Shanghai Park on, let me see if I can do this. Over here, right there that is our 5 to 12 playground area, and over here would be our 2 to 5 playground area. These are just some of the some pictures of some of the things that are going on out there. That is our 5 to 12 playground area, correct? You can see our slide over there has some slits in it, and our table's not looking so good. Before I get to so the first option would be to remove the children aged 5 to 12 playset. This area has the most significant issues. Refurbish the children aged 2 to 5 playset, and then leave the swing bays because they are in operable condition right now. Our option 2 would be to close off the age 5 to 12 playset and then order and replace the most worn out playground parts. This will extend the life of the 512 playset for a few years. The lead time replacement for parts is about 3 to 6 weeks. We would recommend closing off the 5 to 12 playset in the meantime, just due to the current safety and risk factors. And then if this option is selected, staff would follow up with a quote. And then in 2017, staff retrofitted Northridge Park, and that was about over $40,000 to retro that. Our option 3 would be to reprogram funds totaling $260,000. We would work with neighborhood to select new equipment for children aged 2 to 5 and 5 to 12. The lead time on playground equipment is 4 to 9 months, and that would be just for the equipment. So depending on the neighborhood and the Park and Rec Commission meetings and stuff, that timeline would most likely extend, be a little bit longer. And then we would remove the. And the fiscal impact, so we would be using $130,000 from our annual playground replacement CIP account. This money is actually for Shanghai Park because it is the next one on the list for the replacement. And then the $25,000 from special O&M playground. There is still sufficient funds in that after this $25,000 that would still be available for repairs and BARC for other playgrounds within the city. And then the $105,000 from the unspent funds from DDR Bains S Park. There are still things that need to be done out there, but they're not a high priority right now. And then Our alternative would be to leave the playground equipment as is and just risk the injuries to those utilizing it. So our recommendation would be to receive options for the playground equipment at Shanghai Garden Park and provide direction to staff. And then questions.
Okay, we'll start this discussion by, I'll ask if we have any comments from the public, and we do have one speaker card from Heather Esmond.
Good evening, gentlemen. Heather Esmond. I live on the corner of Lincoln and Sandboard Road, and I'm also on the Parks and Rec Commission. I'm not speaking for the commission, but I am on the commission. And I wanted to say two things. One, I gave you a piece of paper there. That is something that I took on as one of the duties of the commission, was to find out about the parks in particular in the area. And I went and surveyed the park. This survey was put together with the help of Brad McIntyre, and I went twice to this playground. I had a meeting with Brad McIntyre, then back in, I think, February, we talked about this. He told me that the park was the next on the list to be for stuff to be replaced. So what I don't understand is why there's not sufficient funds if he knew that this was the next one on the list, is what he said. But anyways, at that time I told him we need to take out the 2 to 5. There was so much there that was damaged that needed to be taken out. I mentioned these other things. We set up a system of grading, and the park is really bad. But I wanted to read something to you because I wanted to make sure that this was clear. So according to Yuba City Municipal Code, Section 9-1.03. Whatever, powers and duties for the commission. The Parks and Rec Commission shall act. I don't know if you know the difference between shall and may. Shall act as an advisory capacity to the city council, to the city manager, and to the Parks and Recreation director in all matters pertaining to parks and recreation. The commission shall interpret the leisure time needs, facilities, and services to public officials and the general public in order that adequate support may be obtained. The commission shall recommend general policies concerning all parks and recreation properties, facilities, plans, programs, and activities. So my conversation with Brad McIntyre, none of this came up during our meetings. We don't do anything at our meetings. The only thing we've ever voted at on our meetings is for chair. None of this stuff comes up to us. They don't ask us. We don't get any input in any of this. So I ask you, if you don't want our opinion, then you have the power to disband us. However, if you do not disband us, even you have to follow the municipal code. So going around and coming over here directly and asking what you guys want without trying to find out, we have some great people on our commission. There are women there that deal a lot with a lot of the children stuff that we have in the community. They could definitely give you input on whether or not they think it's important to risk injury or not. I mean, I think that's what she said, isn't it? Yeah, that was a bit scary. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public on this item?
Yes. Kimberly Marquardt. Yes, I was on my bicycle ride. I do a 30-mile ride every day. And I came upon the Shanghai Bin park there, and I needed to use the restroom. I'm just curious if, are you guys going to put any restrooms in this park for people to use or the children to use while they're playing on these toys that you guys are putting in? Because there is no restrooms anywhere along the bike trail or in any of the parks on that side of town. I just wanted to know if you had any plans of putting any bathrooms in there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this item? Any further public comment? So thank you for that presentation. And I would like to thank the community members that came before this council a couple weeks ago I want to thank them for bringing this to our attention, because those pictures are pretty sobering. So I guess it's up to this, you're looking for direction tonight.
Yes.
I guess it's up to this council to decide what doing nothing is not an option. That was one of the options. Doing nothing that's not an option. But what we are going to do with limited funds. And so I'll bring this back to to council for discussion.
Through the mayor. Thank you, Ann, for the presentation, and Rob and Ernie, thank you for your hard work at our parks. I know they're not all perfect, but you guys sure try to make them that way, and I appreciate the work. Can you put option 1 back up for me? So I think that the one that's the danger, the 5 to 12, I agree with your recommendation to let's get that hazard out of the way. The refurbishment of the 2 to 5 play set, to leave the swing bays and program funds as available. Actually, before Ms. Essman spoke, my recommendation was to, with this option anyway, was to engage and try to come back with something, your recommendations, your best recommendations about a path that we can follow. You're familiar with the pricing, or not the pricing, but the pricing, yes, but our ability to pay. And we certainly don't want a substandard park out there, but at the same time, I do think it is reasonable, even though there may be a time delay, take care of the hazard. Let's re-engage with the Parks and Rec Commission, as we have done previously on other projects, and then come back to us with your recommendation. That's what I would suggest. Get rid of the hazards, whatever the hazards are, and that I don't know, when you say refurbish the 2 to 5 play set, does that mean it is in need of immediate repair, or is it something that it's okay for now, but
there are no hazards currently in the major hazards in the 2 to 5. There is a lot of graffiti on it and vandalism. There's a few missing parts that aren't life-threatening or debilitating, but to put money in this play structure is just taking away from a new play structure down the road. So that's why we've just kind of been waiting for the funds to become available.
So you have the line item of the 25,000. I mean, is that there's sufficient funds within that to take care of the things that you're talking about? No. I mean, again, I'm not telling you what to do. It just seems that might be an option that you might follow.
If I could, I deal with getting the parts over here. So the issue with older units is they don't have parts in a shelf. So if they even create them anymore, after 20 years, it gets really hard to have them remanufacture a whole new part or a deleted part. That's where we're having, if we can make it safe and remove, then those are the steps that you will do leading into full replacement because of the 20-year lifespan of the parts.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
So yeah, with the funding, we should be able to
Make it safe.
Make it safe.
Perfect. Does that answer the question you had? Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like what I'm hearing is we're going to concentrate on removing the immediate danger and then coming back to council at a later time with the specifics? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, if I may, ma'am, would you go just hit, I'm trying to get to 3, would you hit 2 again for me, please?
Option 2.
Oh, option 2, sorry. There you go. So on that second bullet, order and replace most worn playground parts, is that for both? For both, okay. Program, now option 3, please. Okay, and then the 260 will cover both, replace both, and of course remove the 5 to 12. So, like probably all of us in here, when we're going through these, I'm thinking, okay, where's the money coming from? But luckily, and I appreciate, the next slide, you told us. Could you hit that one, please? So for the 130th CIP, the 25K we already talked about, 105 unspent from DRS Bains Park. So we only have so much money. We always have to rob Peter to pay Paul. So if in theory we went with this one, what other things can't we do that you were going to do with that money?
At DDR?
Huh?
At DDR,
No, well, yeah, the 130 apparently is already for Shanghai, right? 25K, we have that. So at DDR, I mean, it sounds like we have the money, and it's already programmed for that, but we're going to take something away from DRS Bains. What would that be? Do you know?
It would be trash enclosures.
105K for trash enclosure.
Yes.
I'm in the wrong business. So with that in mind, I would say rather than piecemeal and wait for the community, I think it's a good idea if we put the money where it's programmed for. And I think we move money around all a lot, so if we're going to do a trash enclosure, that can wait, you're right. I agree.
I have ideas for that.
All right. So
it sounds like we've got 3 in favor of this option.
Yes, I'm in favor of what you're saying. I just think that, again, the idea of engaging with the public on replacement, I think, is important. I'm not an expert in that stuff. You guys would be much more in tune with that. I think that's what you're saying, though, is that you'd want to have the public.
Absolutely. I think when we were planning on DRS Bains, we had a community meeting, several at Terrebonne School for that purpose. And yeah, we have the money to do it. But as far as specific amenities, I think it's critical that we get the neighborhood's input and the commission.
We're planning on doing.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, and thank you for keeping our community safe. Do you have the direction?
Yes, option
Okay.
3.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 11, consideration of development plan 23-02 Merriment Village Apartments, presented by Ashley Potoshnik, Development Liaison. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I will try to keep it nice and brief. I liked that earlier in the meeting. A good brief is a brief brief. That's my new motto. So this item before you is the Merriment Village Apartment Project. And my presentation will briefly discuss what that project is and outline a recommendation for council. This project is located on North Walton Avenue, and the entitlement, the reason we're before you today is for a development plan. Per the municipal code, the city council is required to consider all development plans of this size, and so that's what we are here for tonight. As I mentioned, the project is located on North Walton Avenue at 428 North Walton. It is currently vacant. It's about 7.5 acres. And the general plan and land use designation for this parcel of land is for high-density residential. So it's our R3 zone. There is an overlay. That's what the X29 stands for, which I can dig into more detail if you would like. But the moral of the story is that the proposed development complies with the existing general plan and land use designation. The applicant, Habitat for Humanity, is proposing to construct 218 income-based units. So this will be an apartment complex with capital A affordable apartments. So they'll be income-based. And Habitat for Humanity is looking at a variety of funding options for this development. There's a decent amount of background with this project, which is outlined in the staff report. I'll just highlight a few key items that are relevant. So this item has come before council before. There's been discussion as well as community workshops regarding this proposed development, and council has provided the staff and Habitat for Humanity with collaboration and information regarding the proposal. So in May of this year, Habitat for Humanity submitted a grant application for Home Key 3.0 funding, and that was semi in collaboration with the city. So we're in, I don't know if I should say partnership, but we are in support of this Home Key 3.0 funding application. And then the most recent item was last month at the Planning Commission meeting. This item was brought before Planning Commission, and they unanimously recommended approval of this project to the City Council. So I'll kind of outline the development that they're proposing. There are 5 multifamily building types proposed. You have building type 1, which is in red. This is a 3-story building. Building type 2 in orange is also a 3-story building. Building type 3 is a 3-story building with some commercial elements, and this is where you will see the site kind of management office. And then building type 4 is a 4-story building. This is along Walton Avenue. And they're also proposing a clubhouse with a gym, community facilities, and a facilities kind of utility type building. And the development includes a mixture of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units. This project is proposed to be developed in phases. The first phase is for this building 4, so the 4-story building along Walton Avenue is included in the first phase, as well as site improvements, roadways, parking, curb and gutter, trash enclosures, etc. And then phase 2 is proposed to be all the rest. When staff analyzed this proposal regarding the phasing, we noticed that landscaping was an element that wasn't discussed in phase 1. So a condition was added to clarify which landscaping needs to be completed in phase 1 so that you don't just have a building with no landscaping. We want to have that landscaping as required by the municipal code. So the conditions outline that requirement. As I mentioned, this proposal is consistent with the general plan. There are several policies in place in the general plan as well as in our housing element chapter of the general plan that discuss the need for affordable housing, a variety of housing types, and partnering with housing advocates in order to provide this housing to the community. The proposed development is compatible with the surrounding uses. There's single family, 2-family, and multiple family land use surrounding this parcel, as well as some commercial zones. And all city services are available to the property. So design review was of big importance as this is very visible from Walton Avenue. So staff looked at the design of each building as well as the layout or the site design. And one key point for site design was regarding the setbacks. So our municipal code outlines setback requirements for R3 or multifamily zoned land. And it has this kind of, I call it a step back. That's how I make sense of it. So basically, if you're right next to a single family or low density zoned parcel, you have to be set back farther if you want to have 3-story or 4-story. And this proposal complies with that requirement. So you can see here on this image, the requirement basically states in order to build a 3-story building adjacent to single family or 2-story residential, you have to be at least 35 feet setback from the property line. These blue lines indicate that the setback exceeds 40 feet. And then for the highest, for the 4-story building along Walton Avenue, it's set back upwards of 80 feet. The housing developments, the buildings are proposed to be adjacent to Walton Avenue, kind of front-loaded with parking in the rear. And all access points will be gated and there will be a masonry type wall proposed that I'll outline a little further. So I'll briefly go into each building type. This is your building type 1. You can see a conceptual representation of what the building would look like. These are 3-story, as I mentioned. And if I would have had my notes open, I think this one is 2 bedrooms. Let me see if I can see. And then we have building type 2. I'm gonna find it. This is also 3 stories. And this one, I'm gonna find you the exact. This one is 1-bedroom units with 1 bath. Building type 3, this is the one with the office and manager suite. So it is primarily 1-bedroom, 1-bath units, but there is a manager suite, which is 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. And then there's also offices for maybe community meetings or some type of office use that might be needed for the development. The 4th building type, which is proposed to be developed in phase 1, is 4 stories tall, and this is 2-bedroom, 1-bath units. So all of the units will be 2-bedroom. And then, as I mentioned, there's the clubhouse and the facilities building. The applicant provided 3 color palettes or material palettes that could be used in this development, and all three options align with Yuba City design guidelines. As well, they have met all landscaping, parking lot shading, open space standards for this type of development. So they're meeting, actually exceeding the open space requirement. In regards to traffic, this development is compliant with Senate Bill 743, which is, it outlines vehicle miles traveled requirements, or VMT, and this project is in compliance with that requirement, as well as access is off of Walton Avenue. So you can see here in the arrows, these are the main access points. There's 2 access points on Walton Avenue, and Walton Avenue is a major roadway that is developed to city standards. And so Public Works has reviewed the proposal and has deemed that the streets are built in a manner to feed this type of development. In addition, there is transit options along Walton Avenue, and the applicant has provided the required parking amounts. I mentioned that the development will be gated. So in blue, you can see the gates at the entrances, and then the red line indicates the masonry type wall that is required in our municipal code whenever a higher density residential use abuts single family or commercial. That's to buffer the different land uses. Staff has performed a preliminary environmental assessment of this project and has determined that it is statutorily exempt from environmental review pursuant to Assembly Bill 140, which has been outlined in the resolution for this project, as well as a condition of approval has been added. This was added following the Planning Commission meeting. It's condition 12A that has been added to enforce the requirements for this CEQA exemption. There are findings that are required whenever a development plan comes before the council. These findings and the evidence of how the project meets the findings are outlined in the resolution. And at this point, staff recommends that you conduct a public hearing and adopt the resolution as outlined in the staff report. And I'm available for any questions. And we also have John Nicoletti here with Habitat for Humanity if there are questions for the applicant team.
Thank you for that presentation, Ms. Potocznik. At this point, the public hearing for consideration of the Development Plan 23-02, Merriment Village Apartments, is now open. If there are any members of the public who would like to address the council on this issue, please provide your statement via public comment and state your name and address for the record. And we do have a card from, is it Matt Goody? Okay.
Good evening, council members and members of the community. My name is Matt Goody. I'm the business manager for local Union 228 Plumbers and Pipe Fitters. We represent roughly 355 members in the community and approximately 50 apprentices. Local 228 has been around this community for next month, October 7th, it will be 118 years. I do not live in this community myself. I live in Red Bluff, California, Tama County. I have had the pleasure of working on the Sutter County Courthouse when that was built. I also worked on the Sutter County Jail expansion, and I've also worked at the Hard Rock Casino as a general foreman for the contractor on that. I'm here today to inform the council members and the public of the requirements of this project being exempted from CEQA. It does fall under the skilled and trade requirements of California, which were put out in January and took effect in January 1st, 2019. Simply states the skilled and trained workforce requirements are qualifications for the building and construction workforce that California law requires on certain projects. Contractors and subcontractors who violate skilled and trained requirements can face civil penalties up to $10,000 per month and disbarment, i.e. being prohibited from bidding on, being awarded, or performing work on public works contract. For these reasons, public entities, awarding bodies, bidders, contractors, subcontractors, and other skilled and trained covered entities should understand and comply with the skilled and trained workforce requirements. So I'm basically here just to inform the council members that this project does fall under the skilled and trained requirements. And I hope that those requirements are met so that I have an opportunity to put my members to work on a local project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments on this item? Okay. Okay, seeing none, I will, where do we go? I'm closing it, right? Okay. Go ahead and close the hearing and bring it back to council for consideration.
You want this one? Go ahead. All right. All right, through the mayor, I move to approve staff's recommendation letter B.
Second.
I've got a motion from the vice mayor and a second from Councilmember Baumgarten. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you. Move along to business item number 12, consideration of general plan amendment, GPA 22-01, and rezone 22-02 associated with tentative map, parcel map, TPM 22-01 for the Ratliff Duplex development. And this is presented by Mr. Ben Moody, Public Works Development and Service Director. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Thank you for the time this evening. You have me for a few here, so I'll work through them promptly. So what we have before you is the Ratliff Duplex development. So it's a general plan amendment. A tentative parcel map was contingently approved at the Planning Commission, and there's a rezone to match the zoning. And so the applicant came to staff a while back, and it was to consider the development of a piece of property at the southwest corner of Frederick and Cooper Avenue. And so with that, the property is currently zoned, it's low density residential, but it's zoned as R2, which is the duplex zoning. And so with that development, they proposed to make it 3 parcels, to turn those 2 parcels into 3, and then to fit duplexes in a township and a kind of a townhouse development. And so I'll work through that here. So again, the subject parcels, 0.3 acres, so about 1/3 of an acre. And we went to the Planning Commission in May, where the Planning Commission considered and made a recommendation to the City Council for the general plan and the rezoning with an overlay district to allow for the various setbacks that I'll get to you in the lot coverage. And then also it tentatively approved the parcel map. And so what we're doing is changing these colors on the map and to allow a little tighter development is really what it's come down to, which really is it coincides really with that zoning audit. And so we have a duplex zone property, but it's what they've asked is to go through the city's current processes to allow it to be a little more dense. And so in order to go through the city's current processes, you have to change the land use and the zoning to allow that through this overlay zoning. And so with the map, again, it's currently R2. What we're proposing is R3 with this combining district, this overlay district. And what really that does is it puts a duplex on each of the 3 lots. So we're creating 2 lots, we're turning them into 3 lots. We're allowing a duplex to be on each lot, thus reducing the square footage. So that's 6,000 square feet. It's down to about 3,900 square feet. And then your lot coverage is reduced from 40% to 50%. And then you have the rear yard setback that's reduced in order to allow those properties to happen. And so with staff review, we've looked at it. The property's been vacant for quite some time. It's a residential area. It's near the high school. We really look at it as a compatible use with multifamily to the east, with with single family to the south, and then being in kind of an infill site on how to make this work. And so at the Planning Commission, there was some talk about concerns about parking in that area. Over the years, there's always issues with parking around the high school. And so there was discussion that came up regarding, with this development, anything that comes in will have to meet the current parking standards, where they'll have to be built with on-site parking. And then there's also the street parking associated with that development, should it be changed. And so I don't know how much I could add to this. Really, we got a vacant parcel. We got it currently zoned as R2, 2 parcels, zoned as duplex. What they're proposing is to make it a little more dense, three lots, 3 duplex parcel, 3 duplex development, in order for it to really kind of pencil out and move forward with a project. And the city staff reviewed it. We looked at those setbacks and looked at the design standards, and we think that a good project that fits the community will fit. And then also we looked at it for traffic. It's really in the downtown. With an additional duplex, yes, there will be additional trips, but we don't believe that's anything that will cause an issue with the existing developed streets. So environmentally, we've reviewed it. There's no evidence in the record the proposed project will have a significant effect. And with that, we're proposing a mitigated negative declaration. And based on staff's analysis, public necessity, general welfare, warrant approval, the city staff recommends approval of the planned amendment as outlined in the resolution. The applicant's representative is here tonight, so he could definitely go into any details regarding timelines, what the development's proposed to look like, and any specifics regarding the project. And so with that tonight, I recommend you conduct a public hearing and then adopt the resolutions and introduce the ordinance per the staff report. And I want to highlight a specific part of this resolution tonight is that with general plan amendments, the city's allowed 4 per year. And so currently we've already passed 2 with our housing element and with the change to the area along Spirit Drive and Highway 20. And so with this, what we're requesting is that it's contingently approved because we have this proposed general plan amendment. The next item is a proposed general plan amendment. And then the next item, we're going to package those together and consider them together. And so that's a common process that's handled in California, and we're recommending that tonight to provide capacity so we still have one more general plan opportunity should both of these be passed tonight. So then that way we have an opportunity to consider a general plan amendment for the rest of the year. And I'd be happy to answer any specific questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. The public hearing for consideration of the general plan amendment GPA 22-01 and rezone 22-02 associated with the tentative parcel map TPM 22-01 for the Ratliff duplex development is now open. There is a written request by Heather Sims Goodland.
Thank you for the...
Please state your name and address, please.
My name's Heather Sims Goodland at 591 Gabriel Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I'm sorry I wasn't at the planning meeting because we had our mail forwarded and we didn't receive it until after the planning meeting was already over. But for the past 45 years, my family has owned the 3 apartment complexes that border the proposed site, as well as another apartment complex that is like catty corner, less than a half block away. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood, and I have good relationships with all of the neighbors, and we care a lot about this property. For us, it's not just an investment, we're really invested in it. We bought it from the original Cooper family, who the street was named after. We bought it, her parents built the house, so to say we love it would be an understatement. And so on behalf of my family and the neighbors in this community, I'm asking the council not to approve a zone change and a setback change. And I actually have a petition signed by many, many neighbors, which I think you might have a copy, who are requesting that this zone change not take place as well. I am pro-business and I do want the city to grow, but this is not an appropriate site for a zone density change. It's right next to the high school, and because this lot has already been zoned R2, it's already allowed to have like 60% higher density than what's typically allowed in a low-density residential neighborhood. The developer just wants, obviously, more money. But the proximity being so close to the high school, it's less than 1 block away from the high school. It is so congested already. There are times when further down the street, I cannot put out 3 garbages spaced enough so that Recology will come pick them up, because I can't put them 3 feet apart because the streets are totally clogged with cars. In fact, Frederick Street, which is the street that directly borders the property, they already have limited parking. There are signs up, but you can only park there for 2 or 3 hours or with a permit. So that goes to show you parking is a big issue in this area. An area that has signs like this is not a good area for a zone density increase. Even if you just put divided it into 3 separate lots and you had 3 new driveways, even that takes away a lot of the parking which is used. If you drive by that area during the day, any given day, every single space is taken up around the vacant lot. So even just taking those away will create a hardship on the community. And adding extra car trips to an area that already has hundreds of extra car trips each day from high school traffic is not safe. It's not safe for the kids. It's a horrible area for this to be done. Increases in density cause increases in crime, and that's not what we want next to the high school. 1 extra duplex is not going to matter very much in the housing crisis, but it will devastate this neighborhood. There are many other vacant lots in town. In fact, there are 3 other vacant lots on B Street just a half a mile away. And if you have to change so many rules, if you have to change the setback requirements and the amount of space that a lot or a building can cover and the size of the lot, it's probably not the right site for the project, because this community is already so congested. There are so many, we have so many problems with crime. Just from the high school, this will just create this tight little enclosed space for kids to come and hide and smoke and just, do whatever. I think 2 duplexes is more than enough in this neighborhood, and all of the neighbors, every single neighbor that I spoke to did not want this to happen. So I urge you to please not rezone this parcel.
Thank you. I also have a speaker card from Curtis Henderson.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that. That's the reason why I'm here today. You took the words right out of me, so thank you. I live there on B Street. As a matter of fact, I missed you the other day when you came around. She's absolutely right. To give you a little backstory, my great-great-grandfather was Frederick Cooper. The family's been here a long time. That house that I currently live in, I inherited 2 years ago with the passing of my father. We've been there since it was built, 87 years, in that house alone. And Frederick Street is horrible. Every morning when I'm going to work, there's too many cars. The students are always taking up parking spots. Adding more residences on that vacant lot is just gonna make it that much worse. And sitting here, listening to the audit presentation and seeing the densities, I can't fathom putting that there, because what everybody's saying, what you said is absolutely right, that it's gonna make it that much more condensed, that much more crime. In the last 2 years that I've been living there full time, let alone my whole life, 29 years, I've had countless calls to the Yuba City Police Department. I had a 2 a.m. wake-up call. Somebody had started a fire in my front yard. Constantly having people cut through, trespassing, students. There was stuff left over from students, a little afternoon delight, unfortunately. I mean, it's just constant. And something needs to be changed, and I don't think adding more residences there with these duplexes is gonna do any bit of good. I've had too many issues in the last 2 years, and I disapprove of this plan in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments from the public on this item? Please. State your name and your address for the record, please.
I'm Kay Sims, and my address is 1018 Hillcrest Avenue in Yuba City. And one of the things I wanted to mention that were the proposed zoning setbacks. Now there's 25 feet setback required. They're asking for us to have 9 feet. It would be too crowded. We have one of our apartments, there's about 8 or 9 feet between where the end of it is and the property line is. And so that could give us maybe 15 feet between us and the next building, which could lead to problems with, if there's a fire, for sure, ours might have a problem catching or getting another one. It looks bad, it's dangerous. The kids go back by some of ours to do their smoking. And if there's more buildings around there, they're gonna be covered more. They like to hide and find places. We've had some vandalism problems also with our places where students have broken in. One of the groups was caught on video camera, so the high school was able to get those students and have them disciplined. There's tenants. We have real strong criteria for our tenants to make sure that they are going to keep the places nice. It's quiet. I think that this would be a problem. It would increase the problem with them with noise. One of our tenants has been there 40 years. There's several of them been there for 30 years because we keep them well maintained, and we have strict standards on the tenants we're going to get. I'm afraid that we might lose some of our tenants if we have as many places proposed. There's also, if we knew that there was zoning changes that could be done on the places, or that there would be some of these limitations, we would have bought the property a long time ago just to protect it. But we didn't know that you could change zoning, or I guess we didn't examine it because we just knew that we expected to have 2 duplexes built sometime, but we didn't protest it. So the only ones I could see that this zoning change would help is the developers and all the neighbors. You know, Heather and I went around to the neighbors to get signatures, and everyone disapproves. It's just, I don't know what else to say. I've been the owner for 45 years. So we've seen lots of changes, but we didn't want to see 3 different sets of duplexes go in. 2 we can understand, but not 3. And no changes in the zone. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further
I'm Ron St. John, live at 526 Cooper Avenue, which is, if you look at the map, just north of there, the house with the red roof, tile roof. Lived there for 43 years, and that has been a vacant lot. If you look at the lot itself right now, it's 60 feet wide and 190 feet long, and you divide that into 3 lots, you have an area about the size of this room that you're going to put a driveway, 2 parking spots, and a duplex on. How are you going to work that in there without it being right up to property lines and stuff? That's just not big enough for the driveway, the parking, plus the building. Second thing I have is, and this is for Mr. Moody, correct? all the underground in that area has been there for well over 40 years. Where are you going to tie in the water main to supply water to that house, those duplexes? Where's that water coming from? Okay, there is some new water mains put in. The other thing is where's the sewer going to go? Frederick Avenue is just a 6-inch sewer main. It's designed for maybe 2 single apartments or houses there. You put in 6 of them. What's it going to do to that line? Is that line going to be able to handle it, or are you going to have to put in a new sewer main to handle that? Because we're at the end of the line, that starts backing up. Pretty soon it's going to be in our house. So I see it keeping maybe the 2, as Heather asked. Please don't go 3. I just don't see the high density being able to handle that right there in that area. We're smaller houses, single family. Let's keep it that way, the integrity of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further public comment on this item? Any further public comment? Okay. Go ahead and close discussion and bring it back to council for further comments.
All right, through the mayor. We have had that presentation earlier today about the need for more dense housing and increase opportunities for folks to live in. We're going smaller lots, smaller dwellings is becoming the trend now. We need to find opportunities for that to happen. However, I hear you, and I haven't driven by that, I will admit, in a long time. But I think based on what I've heard today, these signatures here, the fact you folks came in here to talk about this, and you've made a good point. I do disagree that because you add 2 more front doors, that all of a sudden crime's going to go through the roof. That's a big reach. I understand you're looking for bullet points, and it all sounds good, but the reality is not necessarily, and probably not even likely. However, I think with given that street, the narrowness and the traffic pattern, everything that was said, it doesn't sound like it can get much worse already, even adding even the 2 duplexes. But I would think that, and with all due respect to the Planning Commission, they did their job. They brought forth a recommendation. They looked at the facts and looked at everything, and they did their job and sent it up to us. And now it's time for us to make the decision. And we make those decisions based on what we hear and what we see. And we've heard and saw a lot today. I would be in favor of honoring the request to keep it at 2.
Through the mayor. Mm-hmm. I just have a couple questions still. All of this has been predicated on on-site parking, right? So whether it's 2 duplexes or 3 duplexes, there is on-site parking, or did I not hear that?
Yes, absolutely. So the code regarding on-site parking would still stay in place. So when the design would come to us, it would have to be laid out and proposed to us to be built with on-site parking. So there'll be a driveway, there'll be a garage, and then basically enough to handle 2 parking spaces. And so Is it tight? Yes, it is. You know, and then there's been ongoing issues with the school, and there's been talk in the past, and maybe it's time to revisit a parking program related to the neighborhood regarding the school's impact to that. That is a different option on how to handle some of the parking. And I would say again, being a vacant lot for over 40 years, there's a lot of vagrancy and a lot of crime issues associated with the vacant lot. And so this was proposed as an option to be a feasible development.
Thanks for that. I do appreciate the opportunity to hear that the on-site parking would be there for two as well. I am familiar with the neighborhood. Actually, I think there was a fire across the street way back when. Maybe you guys owned the apartment complex then, but anyway, okay. I'm with the vice mayor. You know, the city has a desperate need to provide affordable housing. And by affordable, I don't necessarily mean, you know, subsidized housing, but housing that's affordable. And what this would do would be to provide some housing at a lower market rate probably than a single family dwelling would be. But I, along with the vice mayor, do hear the community. Again, being familiar with that location, placing 3 duplexes in there on that piece of property doesn't look to me like that would be the right thing for us to do in that existing neighborhood. And I'm very sensitive to that fact. You know, we can always be accused of not in my backyard, but I also think that there's been some credible points being made here, plus our own experience of that particular location. So along with the vice mayor, I do appreciate the planning commission's work on this. I think they're trying to do what they have been tasked to do, which is you know, take a look at a proposed development and see if it merits any kind of a recommendation going forward from us. And I'm going to agree with my vice mayor here. I think we keep it at 2. And I hope that when the 2 comes up, that does alleviate some of those problems there with the vagrancy on that vacant lot, because it's not always been crime-free either, even as a vacant lot. I'm pretty familiar with that as well.
Thank you for that. So I would like to thank the community for coming out in force on this and doing the legwork. It's amazing to hear some of the stories of, and this isn't the first time this has happened in this body, the investment in the community and the fact that you folks have lived in that area for so long, going back to the folks named, the streets are essentially named out of. So you're definitely invested in it. You're familiar with the area. You know you've got a high school there. You know there's issues that come. I graduated from that high school, believe it or not. And I'm very familiar with that area, and I know how impacted it can get during school and when there's not school going on, and that goes for even down at the playhouse down the street when they have the plays down there as well. This body constantly gets requests for more housing because we all know that is a huge issue in this community and in this state. And but it's not always the right fit, and I think that's this is one of those situations where it's probably not the right fit, and I would agree with my colleagues that I think we need to keep it at 2. So we're going to go ahead and call for a vote on this.
Through the mayor, if I
Yes.
may. If the city council is inclined to deny this, my recommendation is that you would direct staff to come back with a resolution of denial for final approval at the next meeting. That way we can put together a formal resolution, have the appropriate findings, and make sure that we've documented in the record very well the reasons why the council's denying this project.
Do I need a motion to do that?
Just direction to staff to come back with a resolution of denial.
Okay. So do you have your direction?
I have the direction.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moody.
And through the mayor, I'm guessing that's a 3-0 vote?
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing 3 nods. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the folks that came out and spent the time to express their concerns. Hopefully, you got a chance to see your government at work And so, yeah. Moving along to item number 13. I'm sorry. If anyone would like to leave at this time, you're welcome to. Thank you. You folks have a nice evening.
Long night.
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, moving along to item number 13, consideration of general plan amendment GPA 23-02 and rezone 23-02 for the Bains Bridge Street project. Once again, presented by Ben Moody, Public Works Development Service Director. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, so a somewhat similar item, different location and a little bit different configuration. And so the item before you is regards to the consideration of the following planning entitlements. So it's an environmental assessment, the general plan amendment, and then a rezone associated with that. So for the Bains Bridge Street project is how staff's identifying this location. So it's just west of Walton, on the north side of Bridge Street. The project's 0.68 acres. No development is proposed with this project. It's really changing that color on the map, and there's some existing improvements that are going on right now that I'll highlight. So a little history. In July of 2019, a tentative subdivision map, 1903, was approved by the Planning Commission. And then on October of that year, there was a general plan amendment and a rezone for that associated with that map. And so, and then recently in 2023, the Planning Commission considered an application to change that recent rezone. And so basically there's a commercial office property that was designated that historically has been there. And so what they're trying to do is get rid of the commercial office and then merge that into the adjacent high density. And so what we have here is this square-shaped parcel. It's definitely a mix of land uses. And so you have the single-family homes on the west side, and then you have some R2, some duplex type or higher density type uses in the middle. And then you had an R3 up in the northeast corner, which was for apartments, and then it had this commercial office. And so what they're proposing tonight is really to basically get rid of the commercial office and expand the multifamily. And so basically it's expanding the potential of an apartment site at this location. And so R3 zoning, it's 12 to 36 dwelling units per acre, but again, with development, standard setbacks, road improvements, at the density, it would most likely be in the middle of that range. And then, so that was the land use with the general plan amendment, and then so the zoning, it would be proposed with it to also be updated to coincide, so that CO would go to R3. Compatibility with neighboring uses, and so you have the R3 to the north, you have the proposed higher density duplex to the west, and then you have some single family, existing single family on the south side of Bridge Street. With that development, most likely it would be loaded and accessed via the new road. There's a U-shaped road that's under construction through that development right now. And so any sort of development that had to do with these apartment complexes in the future would most likely be loaded in and out from this road to avoid how that interacts with Bridge Street. When we looked at the traffic, again, you may have heard this with past projects, but when we're changing the color on the map, we typically look at the most extreme example of commercial office, and you look at the extreme use of the R3. Until the development actually comes in and we see what those impacts are, it's hard to compare apples to apples. So if you look at the extreme situations of commercial office and R3 for that size parcel, they have real similar traffic demand for the commercial versus the R3. There's some time of day changes possibly, but we don't see with Bridge Street and with the size of this parcel that it's a major difference on the traffic. So with that, staff looked at this for environmental compliance, and there was it was determined there's no evidence in the record the proposed project will have a significant effect on the environment. So with that, based on staff's analysis, public necessity, general welfare, staff is recommending that City Council consider changing this general plan land use and zoning. Additionally, the applicant is here who could answer any questions regarding timing or his plans for the project. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Public hearing for 13, consideration of general plan amendment GPA 23-02 and rezone 23-02 for the Bains Bridge Street project is now open. If there are any members of the public who would like to address the council on this issue, please provide your statement via public comment and state your name and address for the record. Do we have any comments from the public on this item? Any public comments? Seeing none. We will go ahead and close and bring it back to council for discussion or action.
Through the mayor, Mr. Moody, there was some discussion earlier by a member of the public about a specific, can you clarify whether?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I would have brought that up. And so from what I heard from the public, it had to do with this project being off of Bridge Street and west of Walton. And he had some concerns about storm drain, road repair. And so with this project, those city standards would have to be built. And so there would be curb gutter, sidewalk, storm drain, to facilitate any runoff from the site, street lights, and built with landscaping setbacks to city standards. And so with that, I'm not sure, the road, with his comments, the road components and the infrastructure should be handled with the development per existing code standards when that comes. Regarding additional traffic, that's to be seen.
What about the Section 8 reference?
Yeah, I've not heard anything regarding Section 8. Sometimes when people hear R3 in apartments, that's a standard assumption, but there's been no indication from the applicant that it's any other than market rate housing proposed.
Appreciate the clarification. Thanks.
Just a quick question, clarification, Ben. We talk about roadway improvements associated with this project, curb gutter, sidewalk. Would that also encompass the south side of Bridge Street? I believe that's where that gentleman lives with the drainage issues.
It would not. And so the developer, they're required to do their frontage and then to pay into impact fees associated with the project. And so regarding curb gutter, sidewalks on the south side, ultimately that would have to be a city-led project and prioritized.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'll entertain an action from council.
Through the mayor,
Yes.
we may be able to save you some time on the next agenda item. And the reason is we were going to do the general plan amendments and then do a final approval with the next agenda item. But since the Ratliff property is going to apparently be denied by the city council, we only have one. So if we make some tweaks to this resolution on the fly, we can actually skip the next agenda item if you're willing to do that. Okay. If that's the case, the changes would be to the resolution to remove whereas number 9 in its entirety, remove the word contingently from whereas number 10, and then in section 5, just keep the first full sentence. So anything where it says this is contingently approved is deleted. And with that, that will be sufficient.
So I will make a motion to adopt the resolution as amended by our city attorney.
I've got a motion from Councilmember Baumgarten and a second from Vice Mayor Harris.
And Councilmember Baumgarten, would that also include item C to introduce an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Yuba City to adopt Rezone 2302 for the Bains Bridge Street project, located on approximately .68 acres on the north side of Bridge Street, approximately 300 feet west of Walton Avenue, Assessor's Parcel number 580805?
Of course it would.
He's good.
Thank you very much.
He's good.
So I've got a motion from Councilmember Baumgarten and a second by Vice Mayor Harris. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion's carry. Thank you, Mr. Moody. We're moving along to 15. We're at 15?
15.
Okay. Item number 15, CBG 2022 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, presented once again by Ben Moody.
All right, so moving on to housing part of development services. And so what I have before you tonight is really the annual report regarding our CDBG program. And so our analyst, Shannon Sardo, helped put this together, and she's online to help answer any specific questions as we work through this. And so, again, annually, it's called the CAPER. The city is required to put a notice out and then receive feedback regarding how we're doing and how we're spending our, how we're doing on spending our CDBG money. And so the CAPER tracks the city's progress in utilizing these funds that are programmed each year in the program year to meet housing and community development goals outlined in our 5-year consolidated plan. And so in program year 2022, staff council authorized the allocation to various programs. The Yuba Center Homeless Consortium, the Playseum, Gleaners Food Bank, Freed, Habitat for Humanity, Senior Center Bathroom, Sam Branham Safety Improvements, a fire station, sign and bathrooms, sidewalk repair assistance, sewer lateral, and an ADA public facility improvements project citywide. And so all of those projects are in various state of spending the money, where many of them are completed as far as the housing rehabilitation funds, whereas Freed is used 18,700, and you have approximately the Homeless Consortium has used their 50,000, and that Gleaners is used a majority of their funds, and where we have the Playseum that's used their funds. And then when you get into some of the public facility improvements, the projects, there's still work going on behind the scenes to make those happen. The ADA sidewalk, it's a big project with a big number out there. The construction's actually been awarded, and it's come to City Council with the contractor expecting to start as early as next week to mobilize and spend that. And so where we had some money sitting on that multi-years, you're going to see a big movement on this this 244,000. The contract is actually for 450,000 total, where you're going to see this program year get cleaned up and then another program year to kind of move that money off the books. And so with the CAPER, we're required to do public outreach, where we send out a 15-day public comment period starting September 6th. It goes out in both English and Spanish to the Peel Democrat and also to social media. And as to date, we've not received any feedback. And so with that, I recommend we conduct a public hearing and then approve the 22 CAPER as presented. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Public hearing for CDBG 2022 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report is now open. If there are any members of the public who would like to address the council on this issue, please provide your statement via public comment and state your name and address for the record. Do we have any comments from the public on this item? Seeing none, we will close and bring it back to council for action or comment.
Through the mayor, I'd like to move to approve the 2022 CAPER and adopt a resolution authorizing staff to submit all necessary documents to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Second. I've got a motion from Councilmember Baumgarten and a second from Vice Mayor Harris. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Moody.
Okay, so.
I'm sorry. Item number 16, burn damaged building abatement, presented by Ben Moody. The floor is yours, sir.
All right. Nearing the end here. So burn damaged building abatement. And so Doug Libby, he's at training today, so I stood in, but he brought this item before you in July. And so this is a follow-up based on that meeting and direction from City Council. And so really, we're just diving into a little bit of the additional information, and please feel free to ask me any questions as I work through it. So a little background: an updated public nuisance ordinance was adopted in September 2020 that put into place this vacant building plan process. And so some key components is the city manager designee may issue or order a property owner to submit a vacant building plan within 30 days. And then we could require that that plan be implemented within 180 days or such other time. So we can narrow that timeline down. Real quick on the typical code enforcement options for these burnt vacant buildings. You have option one, which is the traditional code enforcement, where you receive a complaint, you go out there, you issue them a citation, you issue them a notice of violation, you tell them, hey, you got blight, you need to clean it up, you give them a certain amount of time, and then citations start. Many times that's not effective for abatement buildings or for burnt buildings because of the ownership, the state of disrepair, and usually the property owner is just not wanting to claim, or they're tied up with insurance or various issues with the title of the property. And then you have option two, a demolition and cost recovery. The city does have an option where if it's a safety hazard, the city could go in there and correct that safety issue, and then look to put a lien against the property and recover that over time. Or you have this receivership where you work with a third party to act to do that work, and then they take a cut of the profits in order to facilitate that work. Again, the abatement challenges is property owner motivation of where it's at and who owns it, and usually there's just no money there. There's no value left in the house, and so they're trying to figure out what to do. And so if you already have a negative value property, if you go slap citations onto that property, it doesn't motivate them like you would see typically for another type of code enforcement. There's utility company delays, removing infrastructure prior to demolition. The property insurance, there's property insurance issues as far as is the amount cover the cost to replace. Delays resulting from insurance adjuster processes, availability of design professionals for building plans and what it takes to do that, and then just ability of contractors to make it happen timely. So the feedback we heard from council on the 18th is determine the number of first responder service calls. So there was a list provided when we coordinated with the Yuba City Fire Department where they keep track of a burned building, a burned property list that they provided to us. And so since then, staff really went through that list to update it as far as, okay, what's the status of each of these properties and where are they at? And then we also looked at the number of first responder calls to see if we could prioritize those. We provide a status of the vacant building plans, and so my next slide, and also in the staff report, attachment 2. So we took that list, and staff went through it, and we were able to weed some of them off. Some of them were just vacant property. Some of them have been corrected, and so they brought that list down to about 17 properties, and then where staff has been working to implement vacant building plans going forward. And so with that, Code Enforcement Officer Lincoln Eden's here too, that could help provide any insight if there's any specific properties or kind of our processes on that. Then also we looked at funding options, and so staff coordinated with the CDBG rep and HUD just to find out, hey, is there funding opportunities through the CDBG program that if we wanted to set aside some money or apply for money through the CDBG program, can that be done? And the answer is yes, in specific areas. So if you're in that low income census tract, yes, demolition and property abatement of blighted property qualifies for CDBG funding. In order to do that, staff would have to apply for it, and then City Council would have to consider that as an allocation each year for those, and they would have to be used for qualifying properties. And then we did a little research on just what's the typical cost to abate a fire damaged building, and really what we found, it's anywhere from $45,000 to $100,000+, and it really comes down to, is it a carport, Is it asbestos? How old is it? And with the city getting involved in prevailing wage rates, I could see where you need a budget probably $100,000. You know, some of them might be $50,000, but you have probably staff time and legal fees associated with that. And then, you know, some might be a little bit more, and then over time, but I would recommend a budget number of probably close to $100,000 per parcel. This is hard to read. I'm sure it's attachment 2 in your in the staff report. But one of the big takeaways is the calls for service. And so I'll click through it real quick, but you have Becky Lane, 2061 Becky Lane. It looks like there was a burn in December of 2020. They have 10 calls for service. For reference, for Honor Oak, 1335, there was 18 calls for service. Those are our 2 highs. And then we have some at 6 with Alomar Way. And then on the side, we've updated to see where the status is. And so we've with the change in policy for staff is that when we receive this, when we receive the notice of burn notice, the staff will then move forward, code enforcement staff will then move forward to implement a vacant building plan and then put pressure on the property owner that it can't be left how it is. And so we don't have 2 different arms of the city where you have the fire and PD responding and code enforcement not knowing about it, is so that when we hear about this notice through fire department, through their red tag policy, they notify building. And so building's now going to coordinate with code enforcement. So then that puts the wheels in motion on the code enforcement side, not just wait for a neighbor to complain at some future date. So really what I have with this presentation is that some recommendations to formally have council implement a policy to initiate a vacant building plan provision of the city's public nuisance ordinance within 30 days, so that it basically puts it, it formalizes it, and it's not just staff saying, hey, we're going to do it. It's that, hey, we're going to formalize this policy that within 30 days, if a burned property comes in, we're going to request that they be put on a vacant, staff's going to put them onto a vacant building plan. Direct staff to annually apply for community development block grant funding through the budget process and look at that. So as part of that $600,000 plus that comes to the city, we could put in an application so it's at least considered every year if that's a potential, how we prioritize that funding if there's some funding available to put into that property abatement capital improvement project. And then direct staff to review and recommend funding options through the 24-25 budgeting cycle for other potential abatement or blighted buildings. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you want to work through any of the specific sites as far as what their status is.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Do we have any comments from the public on this item?
Heather Esselman again. I know the owner of 2nd Street, so I think everybody knows the building on 2nd Street that there was a fire. It's beautiful, old, not Victorian, it's something like that. Yeah, that one. So they would love to get started with that. They're having problems with the insurance. So whatever you do, please just, if you have to make a separate niche for, because this is not a low-income area. It's all those old houses right there. It's right next to, I think everybody knows that one. The one over off 2nd Street across from the old courthouse and how that burned down. There is a house behind it. They're trying to get that settled with the insurance company. Last time I talked to them in July about it. So, like I said, whatever you decide, just keep that in mind, because forcing them to do something where they would have to pay a higher fee because the city doing it would cost more than them going out and finding somebody. I mean, I don't know how much it would cost to take that sucker down, because that's big if they decide to demolish it. So it's not like a single, it's not like some stick thing that they put up. This is a really old building. It was absolutely gorgeous. So I'm hoping that you might get some information on that one.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this item?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jen Spaller. My husband and I live directly across the street from 1335 Honor Oak Lane. First, regarding the 18 calls up there, I personally, from my home, I have 23 records of calls at home, so that's for the police only. We've also had 2 fires. One of them was started by 3, what I assume were aerosol can bombs. So there's a lot more with the Honor Oak. And the thing about Honor Oak is I hear that you're classifying kind of with the grant that there has to be certain income, but what about the houses that are sitting where owners are not being actually addressed by code enforcement? Because that is the situation that we were facing. First, we want to thank Councilman Boomgarden for caring enough and being brave enough to meet with our neighborhood beginning in May. Sorry, I can't see with this on. We were all frustrated at that point, and he heard us. Thanks to him, he was able to get done what we couldn't on our own for 14 months, removing the target for crime in our neighborhood. While we all understand crime has increased the past few years, there is no excuse for a city to allow any neighborhood to live with trash properties clearly causing spikes in criminal activity without addressing it. And I'm not talking about the owner-occupied properties that are having problems with insurance companies. That's not the problem, because normally from what I've researched, those are moving along, and as she stated, you got issues with insurance companies or whatever. The engaged property owners are not the ones that I'm talking about. However, as someone who has been dealing with one of those problem properties and its owner for the last 14 months before Councilman Boomgarden got involved, none of the policies and procedures that code enforcement has now, the owner hadn't even been talked to by the city, and it had been 14 months after the first fire, and then it had been another, I think, additional 2 months after the second fire, and they occurred a year apart. When my husband went to code enforcement to make a report in March after the second fire, we were told that there had been no reported issues at 1335 Honor Oak Lane. However, when our neighborhood met with Councilman Boomgarden, it was discovered our neighbors had been calling code enforcement, wondering why nothing had happened or was happening with the burned out house on Honor Oak Lane. We first spoke to Councilman Boomgarden the end of May, 2 months after reporting the property. After we made our report to code enforcement, I constantly had to follow up and begin sending code enforcement messages every time I was contacting the owner on ongoing issues at that property. I was contacting the owner. Then I was letting code enforcement know that I was contacting the owner. By the time, thankfully, we got Councilman Boomgarden involved, because he actually was the one that was able to get the house, or the process moving, and the house actually came down in July of this year. Let's be honest, if Councilman Boomgarden didn't get involved, we'd still probably be dealing with this house, and until Council Boomgarden got involved, the code enforcement department wasn't proving that to be an untrue statement.
Can you just wrap it up real quick?
Sure. So basically, for 16 months, our neighborhood had to live with, and my husband and I had to live across the street from 23 plus calls from us alone, calls of service to the police, 2 fires, and 3 bombs is how I classify it. The reason why we're here today is because I don't see the responsibilities being taken for code enforcement not being involved. And I'm asking the council to please consider these issues before any kind of budget increase, and deal with the issues within the department, because we were basically standing across the street from this building saying, hello, we need help, and nobody was paying attention until Councilman Boomgarden got involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments on this item?
My name is Jackie Lance, and I live at 1545 Honor Oak Lane, and down the street from Jen. And I'm just not sure why it would require us getting our local councilman involved to get anything done. Just because we have a connection, we were able to have that happen. But what about everyone else in the community that doesn't have that connection? I don't know what kind of auditing or oversight needs to take place within the city to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen again. If this was a private industry, it wouldn't be functioning anymore. It would be out of business. So I just want to say thank you to Mark for coming out and helping our neighborhood, and hopefully the city can kind of get things under control.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for action or discussion.
Through the mayor, I just want to correct one thing, and I hope you'll allow me to do that, was that the house didn't come down just because of me. It came down. It came down because you all cared enough about your neighborhood and took the opportunity to reach out. And then here at the city, we heard you. And while we didn't function on all 8 cylinders as fast as we should have by any means, and I think you've heard us all in a neighborhood meeting accept responsibility for that. I'm hopeful that from the challenges you all had to face, and I apologize for those, that we have come up with a better system that will provide other neighborhoods with the relief they need when they experience something like you all had to experience. A lot of that has to do with processes, and in any business, you can have all the processes on paper that you want, but if you're not executing on them, then things have a possibility or a reality of falling through the cracks, and this one surely fell through a 14 to 16 month crack. So I thank you for having the patience as we work through this and being a watchdog, if you will, and your persistence on behalf of your neighborhoods and your neighborhood and the city. I appreciate that. What I hope we take from this is what Mr. Moody, and I know Mr. Eden is up there as well, and the other members of code enforcement and our entire city staff is that when we have a situation that is impacting a neighborhood, that we act as quickly and legally as we possibly can, and to take into consideration those properties that may be in the process of an insurance problem or what have you, but at the same time, how long has that vacant house on 2nd Street been down there vacant like that? It's been a while too now, right?
I don't know, Bernard, I have a February.
That's okay. I mean,
But yeah, it's been about 6 months.
okay.
Not 6. I think it's sometime around February of 23. And so that residence has been it's been since around I think February of 23. Your comments, I know you said the owner of the property. I just recently spoke to the owner of the property, and it's a large property, and there are some insurance obstacles that she's dealing with, as well as it's a large job, and what they're intended to do with the demolition of that and finding a contractor is, I think, quite cumbersome with that. So we're engaged with them, with that property owner.
I think that is the kind of responses that the citizens need, is, hey, look, we're on it, and then really being on it. And I'm sure I know you would be, Mr. Eden, but I think that too often we don't. In history, a burnt building was usually taken care of pretty quick. A lot of them were owner occupied, so there's definitely an incentive in getting those things taken care of. It's these, I don't want to characterize everything this way, but the absentee owner that has basically abandoned the building. It's now become an attractive nuisance for homeless or criminal activity or whatever, and we just can't have that. So to the point where you're talking about us as a city having to put aside some money to help with that when it is necessary, I think we do need as a council to consider that, because we owe it to our neighborhoods. I don't want to be, none of us want to be in that situation where someone looks at 1201 Civic Center Boulevard and wonders what the heck it's going on over there when they have constant complaints. I know I don't want to, as a citizen and as a council person. I know I don't believe anybody here that works for the city wants that as well. But that's kind of the impression we leave sometimes, is that we're not taking care of something when in a little communication and maybe a little effort would help. So I'm I appreciate the work that you've done, and again, processes are processes, and if they're not followed. So I have good confidence that what you have developed will work on a go-forward basis, and I appreciate the effort in doing that.
Thank you, sir. Just a quick question, Ben. CDBG dollars, if we use that for something like abatement, can we still seek reimbursement from the property owner?
You know, that's a good question. And so we'd have to look into how the funds are, because usually they're meant to be spent and put off the books. And so there are some options where we've seen CDBG funds used for rehab programs where they go in and repair the building and then it's owner occupied. So I believe yes, but I would have to get with staff and confirm with HUD. But we have used CDBG funds for owner, what am I trying to say? First-time home buyer, and then you put a deed restriction on the property, so if it gets sold, then the money comes back in, but it goes back into that program. So there might have to be some restrictions that when the money comes back in, that they stay low-income based. And so we probably have to dive into that, and we could definitely research that so we're ready with the application when we come up for the program year.
All right, that would be my only real concern with that would be, if we're spending money to rehab a property that the owner, basically a deadbeat property owner in those cases, and we're having to take money from the entire community to cover one guy's property because he won't get his act together. If it's reimbursable, we can hit him for that and put a lien or whatever we need to do to reimburse. So that's an easier pill to swallow rather than take away from the entire community for something else we would use that money for. Just speaking in principle here, I mean, it's still a good thing. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it work in here.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Through the mayor, one more question. I don't think that I think the CDBG funding would only be eligible in those areas where CDBG is eligible to be spent. We're still going to have to come up with some money for those areas, for instance, that aren't within a CDBG zone. Right.
Because the burns definitely are across the city. They're not focused just in a certain area. And so it's definitely something that would need to be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Well, I can certainly empathize with the folks over there on Hollyoak. This has been a long process. Personally, the one that's been a nuisance for me is the property right off of Plymouth Street, and I've talked to Mr. Moody about that numerous times. And I think the first time that one burnt, this is the one behind the post office, was about 3 years ago. And then there was a second fire there. And I'm trying to wrap my head around this concept that we live in the state of California where we're so impacted by the lack of housing. Why wouldn't somebody be motivated to scrape that and build a new house? But that's simply not the reality. But hopefully, with this policy, we're pointed in the right direction. And with that, I'll bring it back to council for action.
Through the mayor, I'd like to move to approve staff's recommendations of A, B, and C for item 16.
Got a motion from Councilmember Boongarden and a second from Vice Mayor Harris. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Moving along to item number 17, consideration of ARCO AM/PM public convenient or necessity request. Presented once again by Ben Moody.
All right, so public convenience and necessity. So what we're talking about is we're talking about an ABC Type 21 license in order to sell beer, wine, and spirits at the proposed ARCO AM/PM on Harder that is currently in process. And so many of you are familiar with the site. There's been a lot of planning entitlements lately in construction going. So the site is located to the west of the Walmart shopping center in the Harder Marketplace. And so it's the current parcel has a tentative subdivision map, and there's been some use permits associated with the drive-throughs for Raising Cane, and then also for Dutch Brothers to the north. And so, and then also the use permit for the gas station pumps out front of the ARCO. And so right now, this project is really in full speed to happen as far as being built. Right now, construction is going for this road, this knuckle along the frontage road, and then to come up around the site and modifications. And so, and then the ARCO plans themselves are being submitted. The design engineer is here and the owner for any specific questions. And so this was brought up early on with staff, just as far as the city's consideration and process regarding being able to consider this this public convenience and necessity determination for ABC, and really. And so it came up, and so with consideration of this use permit, staff actually put in a condition that, with the condition of the use permit, that if determined necessary by the Development Services Director to address the impacts of vagrancy, the city may require nighttime security provided with the operator's expense. And then also with the improvements to this, it's in a C3 commercial district, but there's lighting and garbage associated with the site. And so when staff looks at it, we feel that the allowed use is consistent with the zoning. And so that's an allowed use in the zoning. And with it being a commercial area, it's not directly neighbored by residential units that we think will have an impact from noise or off-hour additional use, that staff is recommending approval of that use. This one typically wouldn't come before us, but what's happening in my mind is, as I see more of these PCN requests, is that it happens based on our zoning. And so the commercial, we focus our commercial on the corridors in certain areas. And so the ABC, the way they issue permits, it's based on census tracts. So they say if the census tract, you're allowed to have 5 in this census tract. Well, the census tracts don't line up with the commercial corridor. And so where we allow this use in a commercial use. And so so this one, I believe there's 5 allowed in this census district. Currently, there's 5 in the district. So this would be 1 more in this census tract area. And so that's really what it is that they see that as part of their business model to offer those items for sale. And they definitely can articulate any of the business operations or if any concerns that you may have to discuss regarding operations for the use of that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Do we have any comments from the public on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for discussion or action.
All right, Mayor. I still find that, given my previous life, I find it odd that we're selling cold beer at a gas station, but well, that's not the hill I want to die on right now. Don't feel bad. Texas has drive-through liquor stores, so but I definitely move to approve. We'll be doing A, B, and C. Staff recommendations, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong one. And I even have my glasses on. Number 17, move to approve. Staff's recommendation.
Got a motion from the Vice Mayor?
Second.
And a second from Councilmember Baumgarten. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. I'm assuming that the owners are here today.
Thank you for staying so long. Yes. You guys had a long wait.
That's all right.
You endured it.
I got to tell you, just being a resident here my whole life, that side of town, the amount of traffic, foot traffic, and I mean, you guys are going to kill it. So you got to be excited about this.
Welcome to District 2.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, we rush here.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Boy, he had a long night. Okay, future agenda items. This is an opportunity to discuss with the city manager about items that came up in the meeting that you would like to have brought back to council at a later date. Do we have any comments from the public? Do we have any public? Okay, seeing none. Reports and communication. We'll begin with the City Manager's report.
So just a couple quick items. I just want to say thank you to the fire department and Human Resources. They facilitated a girls' fire academy this last Saturday. That included girls from freshman through senior. There were 16 participants. It was really amazing to see the transformation of the girls from when they got there to the end. And they did about 6 different drills with the fire department and really got a sense of what it would be to provide medical aid and then also extraction and, pull hose to fight a fire. So it was really great to see. It was our first one, and I hope that we have more in the future. And then this Friday is the grand opening ceremony for the Yuba City Meals on Wheels at the Senior Center at 1 p.m. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager, and get better soon. City Council reports. We'll start with Councilmember Boomgarden.
Just 2 quick things. I attended the strategic planning meeting with the rest of the council and city staff members, the department heads. Felt it was a productive meeting as we continue to look to the future. Also attended 2 9/11 ceremonies, one at the fire station here and one across the way at the memorial for the 9/11 incident over at the Sutter County Library. So that's it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Harris.
Same thing, pretty light meetings this last couple of weeks. I, too, attended the strategic planning meeting. I think it was productive, and the time was appreciated. Also good to hear about the Girls Fire Academy. That sounds really good. What a great opportunity for them. I'm sure they'll remember it forever, and hopefully we can make sure that's just the first of many, many more. So that's good news. Other than that, I'm good.
Thank you, sir. Looks like I'm up. I'm going to draw this out. Yeah. So I attended the JAC meeting where we talked about sector reports and went across, discussed legislation that is pending at the state capitol. Attended the city, the city citizen revenue ad hoc, potential ad hoc meeting, which was informative to myself and to the citizens who participated. Also attended the strategy meeting with my colleagues here, the 9/11, also the observance at Station 1 on Clark Avenue. Sabufka, we're discussing potential grant for sediment removal at the confluence of the Yuba and the Feather, and also the city of Oroville has a new levee that they are excited that protects their downtown. Gil Sizer, we had an approval of expenditures. Their installation and programming of a monitoring station. We okayed up to $25,000 for that. Mosquito, surprise, surprise, the numbers are up because of the winter we just had. I believe they're up to 5 West Nile cases on that side of the river and also on this side of the river. They're expecting that to go as high as 20 in their model. And then we're also discussing the manager's evaluation and contract. Attended the Stampede kickoff for the Stampede season over at Vicky Ford. And then lastly, I attended Dr. Dodson's presentation out at Yuba College, which was well attended by our community, where she asked us for our input, and she showed us essentially what the programs that they provide, and I'm tired. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.